Okay, it sounds like we can begin, so I'm going to start. So I'm going to call to order the May 11th, 2020 regular meeting at 7:06 p.m. And I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the shared traditional lands of the Coast Salish people. Council, please unmute yourself. And I'm going to just do a quick roll call, and if you can please announce that you are present. Councillor Baxter?
Present.
Councillor Day?
Present.
Councillor Jensen?
Present.
Councillor Kobayashi?
Present.
Councillor Parkinson?
Present.
Councillor Logan?
Present.
And Mayor Martin is here. I am looking for a motion for the approval that the near-term and long-term agendas be received and that the agenda of the regular council meeting of May 11th, 2020 be adopted as presented.
So moved.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Kobayashi, seconded by Councillor Baxter. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Are there any in opposition? Please use your virtual hands if you are in opposition. Oh, I'm sorry, there is a hand up. Councillor Jensen. You're still muted, Councillor Jensen.
I'm sorry. I put it up when you asked for a mover for the agenda.
Oh, okay. My apologies.
So I've taken it down now, and I will go back to unmute.
All right, thank you. So I am calling the question on the approval of the agenda. Any in opposition? Seeing none, we will move on. Moving on to 3, public participation. There were 10 written submissions were received by noon today, not related to Villa Place development variance permit application, and one isn't related to the near-term agenda, the Royal Beach I'm sorry, somebody mute, if you are not on, please mute. I hear somebody rustling papers. I still hear the person. So I know it's not council. So if that person could mute themselves, that would be great. In addition, we have 5 individuals registered to speak today. Our corporate officer will admit them one at a time. I will look to Ms. Williams.
Thank you, Mayor Martin. I'll be allowing the first individual into the meeting. Good evening. Can you hear me? Good evening to the first speaker. Can you hear me? Hello, this is the City of Colwood Committee of the Whole meeting. Can you hear us?
Council meeting.
Absolutely.
Hello?
There we go.
Hello. Thank you. Welcome to the public participation portion of this evening's council meeting. Can I ask that you please introduce yourself as you commence your address to Mayor and Council, please? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. My name is Lindsay Wilson, and my address is 2254 Aldine Avenue.
Thank you, Lindsay. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to speak and provide some input this evening. I'm speaking regarding agenda item 7.2, which is the development variance permit application for 124 Layla Place. I have already provided written input on this item, as have several of my neighbors, so I'll just speak very briefly here tonight. I'd like to first acknowledge and thank Councillors Baxter, Day, and Kobayashi for their consideration of the public feedback that was provided on this issue during the April 20th Committee of the Whole meeting. I know the applicant will be making a presentation this evening, and I have had an opportunity to review their presentation online. As I mentioned in my written feedback, it's really important for Council to know that the images they've provided in their presentation are not an accurate representation of the sightlines from any of the properties they mention. I know some of my neighbors have also included photos in their written submissions to their own point. It's not possible for the applicant to demonstrate what any of us can see in the neighboring properties from our own homes without actually being in our own homes. I can assure you I've lived in my home for 15 years now, and I can very easily see right into the backyard of 124 Layla Place. It's been mentioned by a few of the submissions. There's a building scheme on title which includes a restrictive covenant stating the lots in this area cannot be subdivided. Everyone purchasing a home in this area is made aware of that at the time of purchase, and that covenant is really important to a lot of people that have purchased homes here. Although I'm fully aware the City of Colwood is not a charge holder on that, you still have an ethical responsibility to consider it when making decisions on these lands, particularly decisions that are going to affect neighboring properties. As I said, many residents in the area purchased their homes taking into consideration that specific covenant and feeling secure in the fact the style and integrity of this neighborhood would not be changed by lots being sliced up and houses crammed in onto smaller lots. The opposition lodged by 21 of our neighbors about a block away from where we sit right now to a similar application to subdivide a few years ago should give a clear signal to council that this building scheme is still relevant to this day. As of today, on this matter, you've received written objections from 11 separate households. A couple households have submitted more than one objection, but it's 11 separate residences that have objected to this. That should be pretty telling in and of itself. The city's own OCP, which is meant to be the guiding principle for decisions such as this, states that gentle infill is encouraged in established neighborhoods such as ours where access to sewer is available. As reported by city staff, there's no access to sewer for the subject property, and while that may be an inconvenience to the applicant, it's a far stretch from being a hardship case, as city staff have termed it. A true case of hardship will be if we as neighbors are forced to organize amongst ourselves, pool our funds to seek legal action to defend the building scheme in provincial court, as our neighbors a block away had to do in 2011. I cannot, for the life of me, understand why an exception is being made to the sewer access requirement in this particular instance. So, regardless of all the opposition, many neighbors saying loud and clear this is not welcome, it's not the right fit for this neighborhood. Despite the lack of access to sewer, the fact that several variances are required and the building scheme on title which prohibits subdivision of these properties, city staff have still recommended this to council. I find it really mind-boggling, to be honest, that this has gotten to the point where it's being tabled this evening. And I hope that you as councillors can put yourselves in our shoes for a moment and really understand how this could negatively affect the neighboring properties, our privacy, and our enjoyment of our yards and homes. Councillor Parkinson stated at the committee of the whole meeting that he, quote, just could not vote against it when it's only a few setback lines we're talking about, end quote. I just want it to be really clear that it's about so much more than that. It's not just a matter of granting a variance on a few setback lines. It's evidenced by the volume of public input on this particular application. This is not something that can just be pushed through in this neighborhood. With that, I'm aware you have other people that want to speak this evening. I appreciate the opportunity to talk, and with that, I will wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We will bring in the next person.
Thank you, Mayor Martin. I have just admitted the second person. Good evening to the second speaker. Are you able to hear us? Good evening. This is the City of Colwood speaking to the second person speaking. Can you hear us? Hi, thank you. Welcome to the May the 11th council meeting. You are now entered into the meeting at the public participation portion. As you start your address to council, can I ask that you just introduce yourself with your name and your address, and then just proceed to your comments. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kate Miller, and I'm at 2246 Aldine Avenue. Mayor and Council, I urge you not to approve the application of 124 Leah Place, as I feel this is a blunt misrepresentation of 2246 Aldine Avenue, as it will directly affect our views and directly affect my quality of life. The applicant assumes that I'm only talking about the Part P4 land behind Aldine Avenue. What am I saying? That if anything is built on the proposed lot, that will have a direct impact on our views of both the park and the Colwood Golf Course from 2246 Aldine Avenue. I enjoy the trees and the wildlife that is on the golf course, directly looking out of our living room window and deck. The points I want to make, number one, is a covenant on the land. It states the lots are not to be subdivided. 2, the environmental impact of septic fields to the water of Colwood Lake, of having gentle infill in an area where there are no sewers. There are many properties in Colwood Lake Estates that are 12,000 square feet plus. Also, what effect will it have on the wildlife? Number 3, what will the proposed house, will the proposed house be no higher than an 8-foot than an 11-foot hedge? If it is higher, as per allowable height of 8.5 meters, it will definitely block the view from my living room and deck. Number 4, the property plan drawing does not match the property drawing presented at the April 20th meeting. They have made the house in the new drawing a lot smaller than previous. Also, the applicant shows that I only have a very small view of the park and golf course, which I have a very large view. And number 5, the picture of the hedge on 2446 Aldine Avenue does not show the home. It shows the garage and home of 2242 Aldine Avenue from the back corner of my property. And number 6, at 124 Leah Place, the front view from the driveway. Sure, the lot can't be seen, but a house will stick out like a sore thumb. It will change the integrity of the cul-de-sac. Also, vehicles increase from 2 to 4 or more using the existing driveway, with height of a home being allowable of 8.5 meters. That would affect the amount of sunlight of neighboring properties. And remember that if this application is allowed, it will definitely affect our views and the quality of my life. Thank you for your cooperation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on, then, we will go to our next individual who's registered to speak.
Thank you, Mayor Martin. We've just brought in the next speaker. This is the City of Colwood. Can you hear us? This is the City of Colwood Council meeting. You've been brought in to speak. Can you hear us?
Yes,
Hello, thank you.
I can. Can you hear me
Thank
fine?
you.
Yeah, so we're getting a feedback loop right now because the YouTube channel is about 10 seconds delayed. So if you could mute that, and then please go ahead.
Okay, how is that? Is that better?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you, John.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is John English, and I live at 401 Proctor Place. I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you this evening. I'm speaking to you as a capacity of Director of the Royal Bay Homeowners Association, as well as a Colwood resident and taxpayer. The Royal Bay Homeowners Association is a grassroots, community-based organization that was established by Royal Bay homeowners, Colwood citizens, and taxpayers. The purpose of the organization is to give people in our community a voice in protecting the quality of life and property values of people who live in and around Royal Bay. We have attended and spoken at committee of the whole meetings and council meetings since last fall. We've written letters, we've prepared and provided a number of written submissions. In addition to voicing our concerns, we've also endeavored to submit suggestions, requests, and recommendations that might provide compromise alternative solutions to some of the development issues being presented and created. All of this effort is community-based, and the whole point of it is to communicate the very real concerns of your citizens and taxpayers that people in this area have with respect to the development plans being contemplated in and around Royal Bay, and to offer constructive recommendations to enable development to continue in a manner that is aligned with the city's new official community plan that's supposed to be community-driven. We are, however, concerned that we're not being listened to and that our requests and suggestions and recommendations are not being given serious consideration. At previous Committee of the Whole and Council meetings, I've provided a verbal summary of written submissions at the Royal Bay that the Royal Bay Homeowners Association has submitted to Mayor and Council and staff to consider that evening. The reason for doing this is to underline the importance that we, as people who live in the community, place on the Mayor and Council reading and considering what we have submitted as citizens and taxpayers. We have submitted another written submission this evening. We would respectfully request that you read and consider what we have submitted. You will see that we have put a sincere effort into providing reasonable suggestions in addition to providing explanations of the nature of our concerns. However, tonight I will not provide a verbal summary of that document. Instead, this evening, we simply would like to lodge a request with the Mayor and Council that you please advise us as to what you would recommend that we do in order to have our concerns and recommendations given serious consideration, and that we would be able to work with you collaboratively in the successful development in the Royal Bay area. Thank you very much. I will hang up and listen to your response.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Oh, we're looped again. We will move on to the next speaker.
Thank you, Mayor Martin. I've just admitted the next speaker into the room. This is the City of Colwood. Are you able to hear us? Hello, this is the public participation portion of the City of Colwood Council meeting. Can you hear us? There appears to be a delay between when they enter the room and when they can hear. We'll try again. Good evening. This is the City of Colwood Council meeting. Can you hear us? Good evening. This is the City of Colwood Council meeting. Are you able to hear us?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Good evening. I can. Thank you. Welcome to the public participation portion of the council meeting. Please just take a minute to introduce yourself as you start your speech to council. Thank you.
Yes. My name is Roy St. Dennis, and my wife Pat and I live at 120 Layla Place. I wish to speak against the variance for 124 Layla Place. First, I appreciate the platform the city has provided for this conversation. I have given councilors two documents. One, a rebuttal to the process staff used as input to their recommendation for variance, and the other, a case study. But due to time constraints and commitments, it would be correct for me to go over both. So I would just like to speak to what I'm referring to as a case study. And what my case study is, a log of the process and the findings and conclusions reached. So I'll take you through this document. The business problem, as I see it, is this. Should you allow and support the development of a new lot and place it where no lot has ever existed? Should you dismiss and ignore the current covenant formed legally by the original developer that says you are being asked to do what never should be done? Your current official community plan is a roadmap that guides you. The OCP says what the applicant wants to do should not be done. To be OCP compliant and allow this lot to be created, the house currently at 124 Layla Place must be moved 3 feet and sewers must be installed. It is understood the applicants are resistant to comply with the OCP or any other statutes that threaten their agenda. Their interests are not necessarily yours or those of the residents of Colwood Lake Estates. So the applicants strategically created a working relationship with your planning department. It is perfectly reasonable for the applicant to move their agenda in a way that's in their best interest. On the other hand, the city will have different objectives than those of the applicants. The relationship should not be adversarial, however, it should always be at arm's length. The city of Colwood picked a side, and this is how they did it. City staff began vetting the process by circumventing the OCP sewer mandate, using the rationale the OCP requirements imposed a hardship on the applicant. Also, regulations exist that prohibit what applicants are asking for. So your staff made 9 changes to these regulations in favor of the application. The premise of all this was that the mandatory regulations the City of Colwood expected the applicants to adhere to would impose undue hardship on the Coburns. Let's unpack this. The applicants purchased 2 homes at the end of our cul-de-sac. Both are single-family residents, and they are on either side of us. They flipped both homes to rentals. One rental has side-by-side tenants, and the other has up and down. The Coburn's primary resident is also on Layla Place. I cannot think of a professional response to your staff use of the word hardship in relation to the applicant's net worth. The issue of hardship is one I prefer to ignore. However, your staff used hardship as their guiding principle. The downstream impact of this decision was a complete and total disregard for well-thought-out regulations. When the dust settled, the OCP was compromised. The following were changed to accommodate the applicants: 4 bylaws, 1 provincial act, 1 legal covenant, and 3 policies embedded within the official community plan. The net of this is you stamped your approval on a request that compromised your core deliverable, the official community plan, and your staff put their finger on the scale in favor of the applicant. There appeared to be little consideration or value given to the residents who are objecting to the variance. On one side of the discussion were employees who are subject matter experts, and on the other side are people who expect council to hear them. You also represent a lady with significant health issues asking you to decline the application. By illustration, her call was poignant and focused. Quoting her, "It will drastically reduce my quality of life." Folks with an interest in this proposal offered their written perspective. The composition of these aforementioned people were direct neighbors, neighbors in close proximity, soon-to-be neighbors in close proximity, and 1 tenant. The people in favor of the applicants all offered a common theme, and it was money. Those of us against the application focused our resistance on values, and of course, money was a consideration, but a consideration far removed from values. If this were about money, there would be no resistance. Your staff gave you a total of those who responded to this application, who was for it and who was against it, and some of their comments. The folks opposed to this application are all residents of Colwood Lake Estates. Some of the opposed border the property in question, and others are in close proximity. Of those in support, 1 is a tenant of the applicant. This probably needs no further discussion. Another is a good guy who is new to our street and who may not fully understand the consequence of his support for the applicant. The remaining residents in support are, of course, the applicant, who lives in a house on a large lot overlooking the lake and Royal Colwood Golf Course. Maybe the applicant should consider doing this on his own property first. Another also lives in a house on a large lot overlooking the same lake and the Royal Colwood Golf Course. Perhaps he too should consider doing what he supports in his own backyard. The last supporter of this application is in the process of building a new house on a large lot overlooking the Colwood Golf Course. Would this person make this considerable investment if what he is supporting existed beside him? I know 2 of these folks were asked that very question. Would you like this done to you? They both answered no. They support the rest of us having our ox gored, but not theirs. I assert if your staff asked all the residents impacted by this application their position on the variance, their response would be a unanimous rejection and would include the applicant. During your deliberations, there were these references: an ugly subdivision. I'm not overly fussed over a few setbacks. We're talking only about a few setback lines. Unreasonable for developers to cover costs for hookup, and a decision based on developer hardship case. I note these for your interest. Instead of enforcing an OCP mandatory, i.e. all new builds will require sewers, you have accepted the recommendation of staff, which is a common septic field. This means that while the septic field currently now has 2 users, it is reasonable to assume the current house will add 2 more users sometime in the near future. It's also reasonable to assume a new build in the backyard will add 4 more users. It is also reasonable to assume with visitors 2 more can be added. So what was a septic field for 2 will now be a septic field for 10. It is important you understand that I have provided for your review prior to, excuse me, your previous meeting, a rebuttal to the presentation of in-house staff. The intent of my documentation was to provide council with an alternative point of view, challenge the assumptions and recommendations of your staff, promote a robust discussion, and more importantly, have you, the decision makers, recognize that accepting your staff recommendations meant you were willing to compromise your own OCP and registered legal original covenant. I did listen online with the expectation you would challenge the veracity of my conclusions reached by me in my document, as well as those of your staff. It is my contention the more information available delivers results that can be defined as informed. Unfortunately, I did not hear any reference to my document or the points I made or challenges to my assumption. It is my contention the document offered you is proactive and identifies significant issues for your consideration. The document I referenced has been attached to this one and is in your email account. I know the day was long for you, and I appreciate the difficulty in making decisions when time is your enemy. Having said this, I was disappointed you chose not to review what I provided. What has been kicked to the curb is a greater good discussion. Are we, the council, protecting the residents of the affected community? Have we unwittingly reduced the asset value of homes in the neighborhood? Have we met with residents to understand the impact of our decision? Does our business decision consider empathy for the affected residents, and can our empathy be seen? Have we conducted a site inspection, discussed the impact of what we do? If we proceed with support for the applicant, because that's what it is, do we understand the footprint we leave as our legacy? To the best of my knowledge, the answer to these questions is no. In conclusion, why would the City of Colwood engage in a process of developing rules and regulations as well as policy for land use, take into account input from every identifiable stakeholder, excuse me, including developers, spend vast amounts of time, energy, and money to create an official plan and then ignore the document when a developer says, I can't meet the OCP rules and regulations because these rules don't fit my scope or budget. Your staff then says, okay, let's just call the next step a variance, when the word used should be dispensation. Why have an official community plan when the document is so easily skirted? There is a registered legal covenant in place for Colwood Lake Estates. As I understand it, the covenant comes in 2 forms, positive and negative. It seems the negative form is the one courts are likely to enforce. I think the negative form would recognize 1 house per lot. At least one of the city councilors is aware of this covenant. Why then would you leave open a legal challenge in front of you, knowing that this may end up in court, cost residents time, money, and stress? Why would you let something like this proceed, turn neighbor against neighbor, when we're all supposed to live in a community of laws that govern all of us? I am 77. My wife, Pat, is 75. We are both retired. Pat is a registered nurse and me a former senior public servant with BC Systems Corp. Our house borders 124 Layla Place, so any decisions you make have a significant impact on us. You folks can negatively impact our quality of life and asset value of our house. I will guess, depending on market fluctuations, our house can move between 1.1 million and 1.3. I say this to give you context. It's a nice place. We have spent years and tons of money during the house and property refresh. Pat and I have been residents of Colwood for 51 years. For the most part, we stay in our own lane and try to be good, trusted neighbors. We have never asked to be put in this situation. This has been imposed on us by others who have one and only one objective, money. It's not pretty, and I wish I could put some elegant words around it, but it is what it is. Here is what Pat and I did. 20 years ago, we saw for sale a large lot at the end of a cul-de-sac bordering on a golf course. The property was a mess and the house a dump. We ignored what we saw. We focused on what we could make it. We have spent tons of money, years of effort, and now it's a terrific place to live. When we moved here, there were no rentals. Now there are two, and the owner of the two wants to put another lot in the backyard of one of his rentals. This is inappropriate and is confirmed by your OCP and legal registered covenant. Your staff take an unabashed advocacy role for the Coburns, and based on your online deliberation, some of you seem to take the position that we should not be living on a large lot. As of this writing, everything seems upside down. It would be disingenuous of me not to identify the elephant in the room. The Coburns over the years have purchased, in addition to their own home, 2 more residences on Leah Place. They both are single-family residents and now have been converted to rentals. Both have 2 renters in each house. Our house is situated in between the 2 houses owned by the Coburns. One is 124 Layla Place and the other is 116 Layla Place. Now the Coburns wish to create another lot at 124 and with a high degree of probability sell it. It is not for me to place judgment on their ethics, morality, or values. What I can say is Pat and I have gone out of our way to accommodate their needs. Now we have no relationship with the Coburns, although we remain civil. We are at the enough is enough crossroads. We strongly suggest this variance should be denied. We can no longer turn the other cheek. Thank you for your time and attention. Goodbye.
Thank you. We will move on to our last speaker, or excuse me, our last public participation person.
Thank you, Mayor Martin. I've just admitted the final speaker into the room. Good evening. This is the City of Colwood. Are you able to hear us?
I can hear you. You can hear me?
Thank you. Yes, we did just identify the reason we were having the intro gap, so we were hoping for a more comfortable introduction on this one. Please introduce
Well,
yourself.
Fine, thank you.
Please just take a minute. Sorry, just please take a minute to introduce yourself to Mayor and Council as you commence your speech to Council. Thank you.
I will, thanks. It's Trev Apperly. I live at 3535 Promenade Crescent. Your Worship, members of Council, City of Colwood staff, good evening to you all. Thank you for affording me the opportunity again to express my thoughts this evening. With your time at a premium, I will keep these remarks to a bare minimum. As residents and taxpayers, we want to be cooperative. We are trying to be non-adversarial. I admit that we are trying to slow the near-term planning amendment process related to Royal Bay down, slow it down in order to meet with city staff and the developer in order to reach a consensus of views. We firmly believe that such a consensus can be achieved in a matter of days and weeks, not months. The problem from our perspective is a matter of feedback. From John English's first attempts to voice concerns on behalf of the neighborhood last August to the present day, there has been no feedback that I'm aware of from the city. No indication as to whether or not the various questions, requests, suggestions, and recommendations have been heard, let alone reviewed or acted upon. We are simply requesting a dialogue with the city in order to discuss our views in a cooperative manner. So with that said, I have a few questions which I realize you are not able to address directly during this evening's meeting. They are questions, however, I hope will give you a better flavor of our broader concerns and are perhaps questions that we can address with city staff in a different venue. First, will the City of Colwood reconsider plans to lower parking standards in Royal Bay, Latoria South? The community is opposed to this proposed amendment simply because it is anticipated that these reduced parking space requirements will further exacerbate the kinds of parking problems that the people who live and work in Royal Bay have experienced and reported. We see, rightly or wrongly, the change in parking as the key driver in the amendment process to the direct benefit of the developer and not to the community or to the City of Colwood writ large. Second, is it possible for city staff to amend their recommendation to add design phase criteria to the proposed plan and rezoning amendments, which would go to maintaining the city's vision of a seaside village? Third, will council delay the next step in the approval process to afford the community the time to meet with city staff with a view to reaching a consensus? And lastly, with respect to the proposed satellite fire station, is there a request from the fire department, together with the requisite analysis and report in support of the need for a satellite and associated expenditure? So I'll leave it at that tonight, and I thank you for your time and courtesy.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will just confirm with our corporate officer, that is it. There's nobody else for public participation.
Thank you, Mayor Martin. You're correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. So just a couple responses just in regards to public participation and a couple reference questions. One, there's been several statements this evening around that council has not referenced specific documents that have been sent and people feeling frustrated that their specific document was not referenced. I'll give an example of just even tonight. Tonight we have 10 written submissions, 9 of them regarding Layla Place. It would be almost impossible for us to continue to reference every single document that we receive. And so we have a tendency to, read them, absorb them. Council has a responsibility that the agenda is provided ahead of time, and that they are required to do reading and to read all the submissions that have been placed in front of them. In regards to specifically John English's question around, how could the Royal Bay Community Association continue to participate? I think they can continue to participate the way they are. That is what public participation is designed for. If there's a request for further, I am proud to say that I have never once turned down a meeting requested by a Colwood resident. I have had Warren Brown request from the Royal Bay Association, and Warren and I met, but I have not had a submission or request by the Royal Bay Homeowners Association to meet with me. I'm still happy to do that. That can get arranged through my executive assistant, Nora Brooks. We can even set it up through a Zoom meeting. So there's definitely avenues and opportunities for people. We very much encourage you to reach out to myself, and feel free to reach out to the rest of council. Saying that, I will move on now to Mayor's message. I have no notes for Mayor's message, so we will, there is none. So I will move on to 5, adoption and receipts of the minutes for the regular council meeting of April 27th. Looking for a recommendation. Somebody has to unmute.
So moved.
So moved. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Kobayashi, seconded by Councillor Parkinson. Any discussion? Seeing none. Any in opposition? Oh, I'm sorry, there is. My apologies. There's 2 people with their hands up. Oh no, those look like Councillor Kobayashi looked like he was just moving it. And I'm assuming Councillor Jensen, you were just moving it as well. Okay, thank you. Thank you, guys. Sorry, I'm still learning this as well. I see the little hands pop up at the bottom afterwards. Okay, so I will call the question. Any in opposition? Seeing none, we will move on to 5.2, special committee of the whole meeting of April 14th. Looking for a mover and seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Logan.
Second.
Thank you. Second by Councillor Baxter. Any errors, omissions, questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Any in opposition? Seeing none, that passes. Moving on to 5.3, committee of the whole for April 20th. Looking for a mover and seconder, please.
So moved.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Baxter, second by Councillor Kobayashi. I saw Councillor Kobayashi move. Any discussion? Seeing none, any in opposition? No one is in opposition. Thank you. We are on to 6.1. This is Ron Coburn, applicant 124 Leela Place Development Variance Permit application.
Sorry, Mayor Martin, are you looking for an introduction from staff? Or are we looking to introduce Mr. Coburn?
It just says to invite Mr. Coburn to provide his presentation to council.
Okay, thanks very much. I'll mute.
Are we there?
Mr.
Yes.
Coburn, there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, so this is your opportunity.
Thank you, Mayor Martin and members of council. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to address your meeting. I'm speaking to the development permit variance application for 124 Lila Place. Contrary to what you may have heard, we are not developers. We have owned 124 Lila Place since March of 2003. Doing a development is new to us. If we felt like creating one more lot on our cul-de-sac would negatively impact the street, we would not do it. We plan to continue living at our home at 112 Lila Place well into the future, 36 years so far. Our wish is to create a large, beautiful home site bordering the Colwood Golf Club. The current lot is very unique. It is over 22,000 square feet and is the largest lot in this development. We do not know of any other lots in the original development that meet the requirements for an R1 zone development application. Once again, this is a unique property. The lot created will be nearly identical in size to the 3 lots to the southwest of the subject property at 124 Lila Place. The minimum lot size for the R1 zone is 695 square meters. The remaining lot and newly created lot will be 798 square meters and 815 square meters respectively. Both lots will easily meet the requirements for R1 zoning. The official community plan also encourages infill within this zone. The newly created lot will not be visible from the road, and there will be no change to the feel, look, or integrity of the cul-de-sac. Approval of this development variance application will allow us to create a lot without moving the existing home. Moving the existing home 1 meter would eliminate the requirement of a variance. However, moving the home would create a minimum 6-month construction operation, followed by the building of a home on the second lot. Moving the home would not be environmentally sensitive and would also displace 2 wonderful tenants, one who's lived there for 17 years. However, we will move the house if required. At the committee of the whole meeting, there appeared to be some concern that we had not contacted the neighbors regarding our application. During my attempts in June of 2019 to secure municipal sewer access for the residents of our cul-de-sac, I personally visited every home on Lila Place and many on Aldine Avenue. Each party visited was told, full disclosure, we will be applying to subdivide our property at 124 Lila Place. I had a short document the residents signed indicating they would hook up to the municipal sewer. All Lila Place homeowners signed the petition except one. She felt she would have to tear up her basement in order to hook up. Nearly every homeowner contacted on Aldine Avenue signed the petition. I have kept these signed documents, but have not included them in my presentation due to potential privacy issues. Regarding this application, when we were notified by the City of Colwood that in order to be included on the next meeting agenda, we had to have the lawn sign placed on the property right away. We were out of town at the time. Immediately prior to the sign being installed, we contacted everyone we could. All residents of Lila Place were contacted, as well as anyone we had contact numbers for on Aldine Avenue. We have remained open for discussion to anyone regarding this application. Not one single person has approached us, phoned, emailed, texted, or any other form of contact. We have seen several residents on our walks through the neighborhood and have even passed greetings as we walk by, yet still no contact. All homeowners on Lila Place have been notified twice regarding our intentions, and many on Aldine Avenue as well. Most people are surprised that the lot at Lila Place is over 22,000 square feet. Before presenting our PowerPoint presentation, we would like to address the private covenant or building restrictions that currently exist on the title to the subject property. The covenant was registered on the property in 1967, where Colwood Lake Properties was the grantor and the first purchaser was the grantee. In 1967, the covenant said no lot shall be further subdivided. Now, 53 years have passed. The grantor, Colwood Lake Properties, ceased filing mandatory provincial annual company returns in 1984. They no longer exist and haven't for the last 36 years. The covenant does not have an expiry date and probably should have one. Times change. Urban sprawl is no longer a sound environmental practice. Today, in many areas where there are once houses, there are condominiums, townhouses, and office buildings. What we are asking for today is a development variance permit to create just one beautiful building site consistent with the size of the adjacent lots to the northwest, or southwest, I should say, bordering Colwood Golf Club. Finally, to address one last neighbor concern, we have no interest in creating another rental property. In fact, we have an unsolicited interest in the proposed site from a senior couple who would like to build their forever retirement home. A great fit for the community and our cul-de-sac. I'd now like to move along to our PowerPoint presentation. Can you hear us?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. Can you see the first slide?
Yes, we can see. Yeah, we can see the slides.
Okay, perfect. So the first slide other than the introductory slide is an aerial view of the subject property with the proposed development line. As you can see, this property is huge compared to neighboring properties, especially to the south. The lot will not be visible from the cul-de-sac, no changes, a unique double-sized lot. And if you look where the cursor is right now, there's about a 4-foot hedge along here. At this point, the hedge becomes about 12 feet, runs all the way along between the properties of 124, where I am now, and 120 Lila Place. From here back to here, the hedge is 12 and here probably 15 feet high. This is golf course property. Between all this area where the trees are is all golf course property. And this would be the access to the proposed new lot. The second slide shows the existing home and the driveway that will become the access to the large rear lot. The lot will not be visible from the road or change any of the integrity of the cul-de-sac. Another shot of the access to the property. And you'll notice the low hedge at the very front, and then partway back, the second hedge soars to about 12 feet. You can see the property boundary right here. The next slide that you see shows me standing at the back right corner of the subject property where the huge hedge sits. Just back over this hedge is a property at 120 Lila. We feel it's not going to have any effect on that property's privacy or anything. It's a totally private type hedge. This is a picture of the house at 2246 Aldine. I think the woman called in a short time ago about not wanting to see a house built or construction. This hedge you see here is about probably 7 or 8 feet high. So they would look at the side of the house, existing house at 124 Lila Place. They will keep the same views as they have now, and we have some directional pictures to show you shortly. This picture looks from the lot to the property at 2250 Aldine Avenue. Now, this woman, the woman that lives there, we had a hedge, and you can see two posts there. There was a nice hedge that carried on from the last slide, but it just, it didn't survive. So we'd be willing to put up another hedge or a 6-foot good neighbor fence, should they wish. Yeah, that would be up to them. They do have an angular view to the golf course, and with the trees and everything that are there, it wouldn't change whatsoever. This is the view from the very back of the lot to over to 2254 Aldine Avenue. As you can see, they look out to the golf course, but it's more of a park setting that they're looking at. There's quite a few trees, and the golf course itself is probably, I don't know, 150 meters away, the actual working part of the golf course, the usable part of the golf course. This is an interesting shot. I stood on the roof of the house at 124 Lila, that's the subject property, and took this picture. You do see a sea can in the picture, and I understand someone wrote it in. I wasn't aware. It's been there 10 or 15 years. I wasn't aware that they were contravening any bylaws, and no one has ever told me that. And I was contacted by the bylaws fellow, and we're going to have that removed. But it gives you a really, really good look at the lot, the size of the lot. And if you look above that container, if you look, you can barely see the roof of the house at 120 Lila Place. Their views would remain totally unchanged. Their house is even angled more toward the golf course. So as for it having any effect on their views, it will have absolutely zero effect. And the intended home would have a garage on that side, so there wouldn't be any issues with hearing people or anything like that. Both property would remain totally private. This slide just shows the yellow area here is this is all golf course here. The yellow, we just sketched it in there with the trees and that kind of thing. Here's the subject property, and the lot created back in the back here will be almost identical in size to these three hatched properties here. It's almost like the developer didn't put the plan together in the best way in order to achieve maximum lots at the time. And so this lot is really kind of a different, unique situation than any other lot in the development. If you look at all these lots, they're all so tiny in comparison, when in fact, most of them are about 11,250 square feet, where this one is 22,050, I think, or 22,100. So it is really a really odd property. And that's why we've made the application. Someone deserves to live back here and have a beautiful home overlooking the golf course. And this is our last slide, and it talks about the property to the northeast, I suppose, and it shows the existing home and this home. The property, I believe it was at 2246. From this point, they were worried about seeing a house built. From this point on the house to be to the corner of their house is 90 feet. And, you know, to me, that's an awful lot of space. That's deeper than a lot of lots are today. And as much as we'd not like to have anybody, we'd not like to see anyone build so we could see it, it's just not fathomable in today's marketplace. So we talk here about the views, and where the house is and where the views are from these homes, it's not going to affect them at all, whatever views they had, keeping in mind there's a 12 to 15 foot hedge along this border of the property. So that's the last slide I have in my presentation. Thank you for listening, and I will remain on for questions if anyone has a question. There is one more point I wanted to make. I believe that when you have a two-house septic system, it becomes a sewer system. It's actually a sewer system like a municipal sewer system with a treatment plant and all those things. So it's not like a conventional septic system. The sewage is treated and professionally done, as they all are. Does anyone have any questions?
Great, thank you. Actually, what I will do is if you could remove your PowerPoint or your slides for us.
Okay.
And then what I will do is I will actually look to council to see. Now, council, this is this is 7.2. So we will be discussing this at 7.2. But if there are direct questions that you have for Mr. Coburn, this would be the appropriate time to ask them. Is there anyone? I see a hand up. Councillor Baxter.
Yeah, I'd like to ask, how tall will the building be?
Well, we intend to sell the property, and we do have someone who's interested, but that's something that we can negotiate. If someone said, let's hold it to the size of a rancher, which I don't know, it was at 5 meters or thereabout. That's something we can discuss along with fencing and that kind of thing.
I rather think you're discussing it now because council has not approved anything yet, but they're possibly about to. So you'd be willing to accept the covenant to limit the height to a rancher as part of the development conditions?
Do you know what? I think that's probably for the neighbor's sake. I think it'd be a wonderful thing, and the existing house is a rancher as well. So I think it would fit well within the location.
Okay, that's I believe that's the only question I had.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Councillor Parkinson.
Mr. Coburn, I wonder if you could expand a bit on the existing covenant on the property. I mean, you said it's ancient, 1967, but it still exists. So is it your understanding that it doesn't exist, or that if the neighbors did decide they wanted it enforced and got into a legal thing, that you'd win that fight? Or like, I guess I don't really understand the status of that. I've lived with a building scheme. I guess just I thought it was the building scheme. So can you explain to me how this goes together with that covenant?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, Mr. Parkinson, but my understanding is there was a challenge back in 2011, but I understand that the challenge never materialized and the applicant decided to walk away. However, I will say that this particular covenant did not have an expiry date, and we've passed 53 years, and things do change. The company that entered into the covenant has not returned their done returns for their provincial license since 1984, and I don't expect they could have any effect on it anyway. We just we feel that the covenant in today's times, in as much as the covenant is there, we still feel that the lot is outstanding in its size, and I think the effect it will have on people is so marginal that I think it would be just a wonderful home site for someone.
Councillor Parkinson.
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
sorry. No, you're good. Okay, then I will move on to Councillor Day.
Thank you. We're in the unenviable position of trying to adjudicate kind of a situation in a neighborhood. And in my time here on council, we've always told, I know you're not, you say you're not a developer, but we've always told the people who bring developments forward that we would like them to meet with their neighbors and the community and basically try to get some agreement prior to it bringing it forward to council, because it's obviously a difficult position for members of council to be in, to try to choose between two factions. So I hear you telling us that you really don't feel that it's going to negatively impact your neighbors, but we've heard from quite a few of your neighbors that they do feel very negatively impacted by this. So I'm just wondering, have you made efforts to work with your neighbors to show them why you believe that it is not going to negatively impact them?
Do you know, the responses we've had have all been pretty much the same. Everyone, it seems, wants to have a view. Everyone doesn't want to have construction, and we understand those things, but it's progress. We feel that there has been challenges in these covenants, especially over the last 10 years. And I understand that covenants that do not have expiry dates and that are this age do not stand up very well. We would far rather, we understand, like, I guess I should say, we understand that if you were going to go in and create what one of the opposition said was a micro lot, we totally understand that. We have a 13,000 square foot lot, and the other residents on our cul-de-sac have similar sized lots. But for the most part, the subdivision is 11,000 square foot lots. If we place a rancher on that property, it's not going to affect anyone. And in a year's time, everyone will forget about it.
I guess that's not really answered my question. My question was, why have you brought it to council to decide the issue without working to get your neighbors on side?
Well, some of the just one second, please. What? I've got a spouse. Yeah. Sorry, I see you there, Gordy. So we have talked to the neighbors, and we haven't got any feedback. The only feedback we get is that there's going to be a house there, and we're going to have to look at it. And I'm very, very sorry for the lady who's got her health issues. That's really too bad. We never like to hear about those things. But as I said, we didn't really see a way to respond to someone who was ill. And we did canvass the neighborhood with the sewers. Everybody knew what we were intending to do. We contacted as many people as we could. No one stepped forward. No one came up and said, we don't agree with this. The first time we got the feeling was when we got a couple of letters in the first go around at Committee of the Whole. I guess we could have rounded up a bunch of people, because we know a bunch of people in the neighborhood who would say, yeah, that's a great place for a lot. But we didn't round up the troops. I understand when things are negative that people get together and talk, and that we didn't do that. We just feel like we've got a very viable proposal that suits the neighborhood and the cul-de-sac to a T.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Day. Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Worship. Mr. Coburn, you had referenced this in your comments, and staff had made a comment about it too in their report about should you not be successful in obtaining the variances, that you could still get the subdivision done, but you would have to move the house. So I just want to clarify whether you would actually move it or if it would be a tear down and rebuild.
That's a good question, Councillor Logan, because it is a nice home. We've done lots of upgrades to it, and it's a house that you probably wouldn't want to tear down, but it is certainly movable. It's on a crawl space. And it would be, I've had someone look at it, be relatively easy to move, and we could shift it any number of ways. But yes, it would be something we could do.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Jensen.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the presentation, Mr. Coburn. I was by there and had a look, and I'm heartened by a lot of what you said, but I'm also concerned for people in the neighborhood. I'm a little disconcerted about the covenant. The covenants are intended to live, forever. And there is a process to change or alter those. And I would be more comfortable if the applicant had come forward and had that already in place. It doesn't matter that the company isn't filing anymore. And there is a process through the BC Supreme Court for addressing these issues. And, some kind of addressing that covenant for yourself and your neighbors, I would have a higher degree of comfort. It's more of a statement. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Jensen. Mr. Coburn, thank you. I'm going to leave you online so that you can listen as we go through to 7.3, but we are going to mute you now.
Mayor?
Oh, yeah. Yes, please go ahead.
Just one last comment with regard to going to the court and that. It's probably going to be a costly process, and that's why we chose to go this route rather than going to the court first.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. So I am going to mute you now. And then what we are going to do is we're going to move on now to 6.2, which, forgive me, Corey, it's Corey Vander Holst. I hope I got that right. Partner at MNP LLP regarding the 2019 draft audit findings report. Corey?
Point of order,
yes.
Mayor?
Yep.
Go
ahead.
Are we not going to take action on 124 Lila Place?
No, that is at 7.2. We're still in 6 under presentations.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine. So we're on 6.2 right now, which is our 2019 draft audit finding report. So I will look to, Corey's unmuted, so I'm assuming, Corey,
I'm here. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I will share screen and go through a brief presentation and just talking about, so I'm going to focus specifically on the audit and audit results, as I know you have a presentation from Manager of Finance coming up. So if you ask you to bear with me for a minute. There we go. Can everybody see the cover page of my presentation?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for having me here tonight to talk to you about the audit. I did mention I have to keep my comments short. Our audit is complete. We are ready to sign off the last procedural matter being the council's approval of the financial statements here tonight. So I have a few slides to talk about our audit results. Starting here, you have a copy of our audit findings report in your package. So we'll start with what the audit does and what we look at. So the first thing we do is we get an understanding of the controls in place at the city to make sure you're getting accurate financial results. We look at the design and the implementation to make sure that assets are safeguarded and that the appropriate risks are being managed. We don't necessarily look at the effectiveness of those controls. So I don't have any reporting back on that, but I can tell you they are designed and implemented appropriately. We sample transactions throughout a year to form our audit opinion. We don't look at every transaction. That's just not feasible in the cost structure of an audit. I did mention we're ready to sign off on the audit tonight. The materiality on the second bullet point there is $950,000. So that's calculated at approximately 3.3% of your revenues for 2019. We usually use a range of 2 to 4. So that 3.3 is getting towards the higher end of the range. That reflects really a level of comfort that we have with your finance department and the good work that they're doing. What that number is used for is it drives our audit work. So we are looking at every transaction that is over that threshold. And now that is a fairly large number. So we sample underneath it. If we found anything that we didn't agree with management's approach, or we found errors, they would have to be less than $950,000 for me to be able to give you a clean audit opinion. So there are no significant errors to bring to council's attention. We are satisfied, and we will be giving you a clean audit opinion, or in auditor speak, an unqualified audit opinion, that we are satisfied that the financial statements that you're going to see in a few minutes here are prepared in accordance with the accounting rules for local government, and prepared without material misstatement. So I will confirm that MMP is independent of the city. We didn't do any other projects that would impair our ability to give you an independent, objective audit opinion. And I believe my last slide, we usually talk about a little bit more on analysis, but I know you have a lot on your plate, so I wanted to keep it short tonight. But just to highlight one area of improvement, and to give the finance team kudos for the work they've been doing. So we're looking at a ratio of financial assets to liabilities. This is one of the most important ratios that we look at when we're looking at, after all is said and done on the financials, we give a look at trends and how things are moving. This one, if it is below 1, it means you are taxing, or you are raising revenues through user fees or other means to pay for the past. If you have this ratio move over 1, it means you have some funds available to pay for future projects. So this ratio has steadily improved over the last 5 years. It's gone from 0.93 up to 1.3. So we have a net financial asset position, which is that is a good trend for the city. So that's it, short and sweet. I promised 5 slides on my presentation. I'm going to stop sharing and turn it back to Mayor Martin and the council for questions.
Thank you. I see Councillor Day.
Thank you. Just a small question, really. When we first started looking at audits with MNP, I think our materiality was in the range of about 350,000, and now we're up to 950,000. And I'm just wondering, over the time that you've been working with the city, what leads to that change?
Thank you, Councillor Day. It's a good question. Several factors. The first one being, as a new auditor coming in, we would have set materiality a little bit lower to make sure we're comfortable and didn't have anything slip through that we hadn't found. So that would have been why the first number was lower. Secondly, maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, MMP as a firm needs to make sure we're staying competitive in the marketplace, for giving you the best service at the best price. We looked at what we were using for materiality and determined we were actually out of line with the market. So we looked at the other audit firms. They were using higher ranges of materiality. So there was a shift there in materiality and an increase. I believe it's about 3 years ago, where there was probably quite a large jump. And thirdly, we're using revenue as a driver for materiality, as an indicator of the level of activity at the city, and something that you would be interested in. The revenues have increased from various, whether you look at some of the developer contributions coming online, and other grant funds and things. So that is the third thing that would drive that materiality up.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Corey, just two questions here. I just need a clarification on that. I don't understand that unqualified audit opinion. If you just clarify that.
Yep.
And the second question I have is your asset to liabilities ratio. I guess I come out of the private industry world, and geez, if I had a 1.3 ratio, I'd be really extremely worried, because we try to aim for a 2 to 2.5 as our own benchmark, and it does depend on the industry. Just from your perspective, you've done this for municipalities. what type of benchmark should we be looking at? Is like 1.3 about right? 1.5? What should we be trying to strive for? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll answer your first question about the unqualified audit opinion. So essentially what it means is, going back to that materiality number of 950,000, it means that when we did our audit work, as we're going through, if we found anything that a missing invoice or anything that we disagreed with management on, it cannot be individually or accumulate to that $950,000 mark. There are no significant unadjusted items for us to bring to your attention. That's what it means by I'm giving you an unqualified audit opinion. If we found something that was $1.2 million and management and myself had a strong disagreement over that one, I couldn't give you a clean audit opinion at that point, right? So that is that magic number, and that was what that means. And the word, if we had a qualification, it would actually be a bad thing. So we say it's unqualified to tell you that it's a clean audit opinion. The second item of the financial assets and liabilities, that's a really good point. Actually, I fielded that question this afternoon from another council, the exact same question. There really is no magic mark around where should you be with this ratio. We've seen some communities over the years, as they get deeper into a net debt position, that is shifting tax burden and tax liability to the future. But that is a policy choice or a council decision of where the burden will lie. One of the things we do encourage is to try to get to a net financial assets position, but every community is going to be different, right? If there is a major capital asset project that the city needs to undertake to continue to provide the level of services that it's providing to the community, you might find yourself in a large debt position because there really isn't, maybe there's no grant funding available for that specific project. So in the context of that balancing act of tax revenue, user fees, grant funding, debt, they all come to play. In terms of what's the right number of financial assets and liabilities, you have a great point that, private company would be very scared at 1.3 because it's very tight. But I don't see a lot of communities getting to around 2, or a 2 to 1 assets to liabilities. A lot of them are hovering in this 1 to 2 range, just because of that balancing act of, if you have to do a large project, you might have to debt finance a chunk of it. There's only so much that you can do for the community. You're not going to turn around and slap a 20% tax increase on them next year. You'd have a revolt. But so there's that balancing act around that number.
Okay, thank you very much, Corey. That's a great explanation.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you, Councillor Parkinson.
So I guess it's a good thing you only had a few slides because we all seem to be focusing on the same things. Just for my understanding, when you talk of materiality of $950,000, you mean that any sort of account that's in excess of $950,000, you beat that to death and you're comfortable there, and anything below that, you've just done sample checks to sort of randomly check. Is that kind of what I should understand from that?
Absolutely, you've got it correct. Anything above that amount, I'm poking around, making sure I'm really comfortable with those numbers. Anything underneath, I'm sampling using a statistical method to make sure that I'm comfortable that there isn't a material error in there.
Perfect. Okay, thank you for that. But on the sustainability ratio or the financial asset to liability ratio, Doug thinks it should be something different. But here's my concern. If we're sort of an organization that has $100,000 of accounts receivable and $100,000 of accounts payable, that's a 1-to-1 ratio. But we're a city, and a lot of our liabilities are in fact money that have been borrowed to, say, finance sewers that are paid for by the users, that are paid for on their tax bills, and if they don't pay their taxes, we can come after them. So like absolutely the most secure type of debt you could probably find anywhere. And so the fact that we're sitting on a bunch of cash and we have some liabilities that are backstopped by our citizens with their properties, seems to me that what's important is what do we have in the way of assets versus our, if you want to call them riskier liabilities or something like that.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And the danger, of course, in trying to be brief and only putting one ratio up is it's only a part of the picture. You know, the big picture to go along with this would be the asset management plan, the fully fleshed out condition assessments, replacement costs, time to replacement, and looking at that to say, okay, you know, it's great that we're at 1.3, but if in 2 years you need a $10 million project and you don't have that, that all has to come into the conversation, right? So it's one part of the puzzle for sure. But like I said, and that's why I said some communities find themselves in that negative position. But if you just built a brand new, you know, water treatment plant, you might find yourself there, and it's not the end of the world because you are providing services that the residents need.
Okay. And then just one little thing on your management representations in your letter. You said you'd requested some written representations from management. Did you get those?
Correct. That is a normal course of wrapping up. Management usually signs those for us today and sends them back to us. So thank you for the reminder. Jen and Alan will be signing those today. Those are the standard questions that we ask every year, and I don't expect any issues with that paperwork.
Thank you.
Great. I don't see any other hands, so thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
You might around because we're moving on to 7.1, which is our 2019 draft consolidated financial statements and the 2019 annual development cost charge report. Ms. Hempting, our manager of finance, I'm hoping is online to introduce this item.
Hello, thank you, Your Worship. Just one moment and I'll share my screen. So I've prepared a brief presentation tonight just to provide an overview of the 2019 draft consolidated financial statements. And we are looking for a resolution tonight that will approve these statements and give staff the authorization to sign these statements.
Sorry, Jen, I'm just going to interrupt you just for a moment. Are you showing us your presentation? Because that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing your,
Sorry. Bear with me. Okay, why isn't that?
Yeah, now we can see it.
And now can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, and it's full screen.
We've got, thank you, sorry about that. So just quick recap, our financial statements, it's a consolidation of both 100% of the city's operations, as well as our proportionate share of the West Shore Parks and Recreation Society. We own just shy of 22% of this society. So just to give a brief overview of our financial position, this was something that our audit partner, Corey, was just commenting on. Our net asset position has increased almost $3.4 million over last year. So I'll just take a minute to walk you through the increase in both our financial assets and, to a lesser extent, the increase in our liabilities over last year. So we've seen an almost $8 million increase and that's in our cash and in our cash as invested. About half of this cash increase is tied up in restricted revenue. So it's within our financial liability. In addition, we had an increase, $2 million of this cash, direct increase in city reserves set aside for specific purposes. We also had an increase in about approximately $775,000 in our general accumulated surplus over last year. The increase in our financial liabilities, it's primarily threefold. So we received $3 million in funding with restrictions. So $1.5 million of that related to development cost charges. And we have restrictions under our road DCC's bylaw on how that funding can be spent. We received additional gas tax grant funding to the tune of $1.5 million in 2019. And again, we have specific restrictions that we must follow. So, as we look to adopt the financial plan tonight, we have a number of projects that propose spending both gas tax funds and the road DCCs. We also saw an increase just under $1 million in refundable deposits. So those are securities that the city hangs on to, tied to specific terms of development agreements, for example. And once those terms and conditions are met, we will release that cash back to the development community. Our tangible capital assets or city infrastructure, we saw an increase there just over $2.6 million. So in 2019, we received just shy of $4 million in contributed infrastructure, and that was primarily related to the Royal Bay North development. We then run annual amortization amounts, and so that reduces the overall cost that we reflect on our books for our TCA. Other non-financial assets, that's primarily comprised of the cost of the city's gravel inventory. Are there any questions regarding our financial position, or shall I move along? And
I don't see anybody's hand, so I'll just continue to look for hands. And if I see any, I'll let you know.
Great, thank you, Your Worship. So moving over to our statement of operations. Revenue, we came in approximately 14% over budget, or $3.7 million. This was primarily related to developer contributions coming in over budget. So from a budget standpoint, we do not factor in contributed infrastructure. And then when the city accepts responsibility for maintaining and ultimate ownership of this infrastructure, we then recognize both a revenue and an associated asset on our books. Our conditional government transfers, we came in under budget. Again, this is that restricted funding that I was speaking to moments ago. So when we have deferments of projects into subsequent years, we then defer recognizing the associated funding for those projects. Overall, our operating expenses came in approximately 4% under budget, or about $870,000. This was a combination of factors. In large part, our policing contracted costs came in under budget. So we have a slight difference in timing between our fiscal year, which ends December 31st, 2019. The federal fiscal year ends March 31st, 2020. So in 2020, we will make a transfer over to the RCMP related reserve for that contract cost savings that was experienced in 2019. And so then in sum, just looking at the overall change in the city's accumulated surplus and how that surplus is disaggregated, the bulk of of our surplus, almost 90%, is invested in city infrastructure. So we have total infrastructure cost on the books of approximately $148 million. And we do have some outstanding debt financing for that infrastructure. Just over $1 million in equipment financing loans for some of our fleet, and just over $8 million in long-term debt financing for some of our sewer infrastructure. And Councillor Parkinson spoke on this earlier, but the debt servicing is funded by way of parcel taxes that are levied on properties that are responsible by way of being included within a local service area. And that's how that debt financing is funded. The city has almost $14.6 million set aside in cash reserves. So these are reserves for a specific purpose, either by way of bylaw or council resolution. And these reserves had a net increase of almost $2 million in 2019. The bulk of this increase was anticipated in our 2019 financial plan. And ultimately, we did achieve the actual transfer to those reserves. The operating accumulated surplus, again, primarily a result of the policing contracted costs coming in under budget, as well as throughout the organization, if there's ever staffing vacancies, for example, that will drive an annual operating surplus, which will impact our surplus. And the West Shore Parks and Recreation Society line, that ultimately that is a non-cash portion of our accumulated surplus breakdown, and that tends to ebb and flow each year as we account for how our piece of the pie of the West Shore Parks and Rec Society changes each year, depending on assessment breakdown.
Sorry, I'm going to stop you there. Councillor Day has a question.
Sorry, yes, just looking at the West Shore Parks and Recreation on your slide there, is that 142,000 in the red?
Yes, so this year, the city, so under accounting standards, we were required to recognize a loss because our proportionate share of the society decreased
right
against last year. Now, within the reserves line item, the $14.58 million, note 12 to the financial statement provides a breakdown of that figure. And that is where you'll see cash that is set aside for specific purposes pertaining to the West Shore Parks and Rec Society. And there is $113,000 in change. And that has been a result of recent years, 2019 and 2018, taxation being levied for that purpose and the requisition amount being frozen. And so that taxation has been set aside, and that's included within the reserves line.
Okay, so on your slide, the 142,000 represents the change in our proportion of the ownership?
That's correct.
And on what page of your financial documents would I find the reserve that we've put aside over the last couple of years?
It's on page 17 of the 2019 financial statements.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. And if there are no further questions, the only additional comment I'll add, the 2019 annual development cost charges report simply provides additional detail to the deferred revenue note of the financial statements. And as shown on that report, the city has not spent any of these funds in 2019. And we did collect in total just over $1.5 million in DCCs in 2019.
Great, thank you. So, sorry, Jen, are you all done?
And that concludes my presentation. I'll stop the screen share now.
Thank you. I've got a couple people with their hands up. There's a couple questions. Before we go to questions, because the report's done, I'd like to do this where I get a mover and seconder regarding the staff recommendation. Then I will go to questions, which first is Councillor Kobayashi, and then it'll be Councillor Day again. May I have a motion to move the staff recommendation, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Kobayashi, seconded by Councillor Baxter. Discussion, Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Jen, just a quick question here. And this is just, when you look at the detailed consolidated statement of operations, the one line, the consolidated government transfers, a budget of about 1.973 million and actual was 157,000. So is this a balance sheet issue and a revenue recognition issue? Because it looks like most of it's from gas tax. So that's why I figured it must be a balance sheet issue here.
Thank you for that question, and you're absolutely right. So ultimately, the city accounts for gas tax funding. It's restricted funding. So the cash comes in the door and we restrict that cash as a liability. When we spend that funding on qualified projects, we then recognize the revenue. So in 2019, we anticipated spending approximately 1.8 million, and the majority of those projects were deferred to future years.
Okay, thank you, Jan.
Councillor Day.
Oh, thank you. I'm just looking to find the Wisher Parks and Recreation surplus that we have, and is it the $113,000?
That's correct.
Okay. And just a question on the RCMP surplus. It looks to be 966,000 thereabouts. And is that anticipated to remain at that, or will that be drawn down?
Thank you for that question. So we anticipate that value moving up again to approximately $1.4 million in 2020 once we finalize the 2019-2020 RCMP contract costs. Those come in after we finalize our 2019 financials. And then—
Okay. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And under our current financial plan, we do propose spending some of that in 2020. That was in order to achieve the increase in policing strength while mitigating an increased property tax lift.
Great. That's kind of what I was getting at. I just wanted to make sure that we were remembering that and had put things aside for it, because it seemed, I know surpluses are a little bit of a different animal, but we did put off all of the things that we had intended to do with the RCMP, and then in order to mitigate those additional costs. But with that healthy reserve fund there, I was just wondering if that was warranted.
Any comments, staff?
Simply that the city has the reserve, the surplus reserve that you see before you at year end of just shy of $1 million. So there certainly was sufficient funding for the purposes that ultimately council has proposed to use that surplus for under the 2020 financial plan.
Okay, I have Mr. Earl actually wishing to speak.
Thank you, Your Worship. Fundamentally the same comment. Council did make a determination to spend some of that surplus to fund officers in the 2020 calendar year, so as Ms. Hepting has indicated that number will first move up and then we'll move back down to a different balance at the end of 2020.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing any other hands, so I'm going to call the question. Any in off? Oh,
sorry.
Sorry, Councillor Day, did you want to speak again?
Sorry, yes. Trying to keep track of all my different pages of notes. I was looking at page 104 of the agenda. I'm not sure what page of the report that is. Hang on, I can tell you. It's page 15 of the report. And I just was trying to figure out, it says there's $195,000 and a bit in 2018 in disposals. And I'm just wondering what that represented.
Just bear with me one moment and I'll pull the detail. Thank you. In part, the disposal in 2019 related to a Royal Bay amenity lot.
Okay. Sorry, I think it's 2018.
Yes, sorry, 2018. So that 195,000, that was the some accumulated amortization associated with $2.3 million in disposals. Within that $2.3 million amount included the Royal Bay amenity lot that was disposed of in 2018.
Okay, I just thought it was odd because it was the only year that had anything in the disposals, but I guess that's because it doesn't happen very often.
Yes, so the purpose of this note here, it's only comparing activity for 2 years, 2019 and 2018. In 2019, the only disposal the city had was on a small portion of a right-of-way closure and disposal along Souk Road, and there was no associated value removed from the books with respect to that disposal in 2019.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other hands, I will call the question to this motion. Is there any in opposition? I am seeing none, so the motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to 7.2, 124 Leela Place Development Variance Permit Application. Mr. Buchan is, our planning technician, is available for questions if council has any. If not, then I will look for a motion. I'm sorry, a couple of people have their hands up. My apologies. Councillor Baxter. Councillor Baxter, you're muted.
Thank you. I have a question about the ability to subdivide the property without these variances. So I wonder if staff can comment on whether it is feasible to subdivide the property, whether or not that requires moving the house and not require any variances.
Through the chair, your worship, to Councillor Baxter, this is Brent Molnar speaking. It is possible to subdivide the property, but only if the house is shifted. It becomes a variance due to our definitions for side, flanking lot and front property line, which causes the house to need to move in order to deal with the side yard. And it is possible to subdivide after the variant without a variance if the house is relocated.
And second question would be, are garden suites or whatever we want to call them allowed on this lot?
Again, through the chair, yes, this lot would be considered almost too large for garden suite because it would underutilize the potential of the lands. But garden suites are a form of development that could be seen here, yes.
Thank you. Another question. Anyone in Colwood that wishes to can rent their property, right? You don't need to apply for permission to do that. You don't need any approvals.
Sorry, to become a landlord, in other words, is to not occupy the land and just rent it out to a tenant?
Yeah, anybody could move out of their house and rent it. Yes, rent it
Yes,
out.
there's no special permit or business license that's necessary to become a landlord in that sense.
And the legal activity that was mentioned back in 2011, I think, are we aware of the outcome of that?
No, we haven't researched the specific court case or if it went to court or how far it went. Because it's a private property covenant, the city's not vested in it. Mr. Coburn, the developer, has been asked to research that into himself and to build his own confidence in being able to move forward or not.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have. I'd like to make some remarks about this later. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Day. Councillor Day, then Jensen.
Thank you. I guess my question is, even though we're not a party to this agreement, this development scheme, and we're not responsible for enforcing it, I'm just curious why we would completely ignore it. You know, we're not responsible for enforcement, but I'm just wondering why we would completely ignore that.
It actually has not been completely ignored. It was noted by staff at the beginning of the application and spoke to Mr. Coburn about it. There is legal precedent, though, in case history, where the city has no right to be involved in the private property covenant. It is between the holders of that covenant and the landlord, and this business of the city should not interfere with those parties' ability to deal with a covenant on a private basis. It is not party to the city.
Right, but I do get that it was mentioned in the staff report, but by recommending that it move forward despite the covenant, aren't we in fact taking sides?
Thanks for that question, especially as it came up earlier on and through the chair. Staff's recommendations are based on policies, understanding of the zoning text, and OCP is interpreted. That is wholly the basis of the staff opinion. It does not favor one side or the other, but provides an objective overview against those policies and procedures for council to consider the motion at hand.
Okay. And so in regard to the OCP, my understanding, and I did really look at that when we were developing our OCP, was you know, the matter of the sensitive infill and whether or not that would require sewer connection in order to be achieved. And my understanding was that the draft of the OCP did enshrine that you know, the infill development would take place on sewers. So I'm just wondering why the staff recommendation kind of jumped over that.
As discussed at the committee, the staff took exhaustive efforts and did on-site consultation, as well as met with the neighboring municipality to review the options of sewering. In the review, it was unlikely that the city would finance a sewer to a portion of the city based on the ground typology that is favorable to septic systems. It may not be council's primary choice. However, I agree that council hasn't ruled it out as their primary choice. So the consideration for infill housing is a factor of the official community plan. The factor of sewers is also a factor of the community plan, but they aren't written at the same line. So they're policies that are be considered individually in regards to the objectives of the city. If the city would like to support infill housing, which the OCP states that it does, this is a matter of which it can be received.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Jensen.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm struggling a bit here. I did vote for this applicant last time around, but I do have some concerns. I did go out there and walk the area. Didn't end up talking with anybody, but I just wanted to get a sense of it. And I don't think it's it's not like a condo building going up in someone's backyard that's gonna darken the skies. But obviously there is a concern in the neighborhood. I don't. Typically, when an applicant comes forward, they've done a lot of groundwork as far as engaging with the neighborhood. And I know that we're used to seeing sophisticated applicants that have much resources, but I have some concerns that there can maybe be some more engagement or deeper engagement, positive or negative. It just is what it is. And as far as really connecting with the neighbors, I have a problem with the covenant. Covenants are intended to last in perpetuity. And I'm going to bet that company that built that neighborhood still exists in some kind of form, and they would be the legal covenant holder. And maybe it's not something that staff is required, or even the city staff, is required to consider when they're looking at this proposal. But I question whether I'm supposed to consider this. These are residents of our community that moved there with an existing covenant. Many we've heard from that say that it was a consideration of their purchase in our community was the existence of that very covenant. I know there are ways to review these in the Supreme Court of British Columbia, and I know it's going to cost some time and effort, but I would be far more comfortable if there were some steps taken in that regard, and perhaps maybe the lot can sustain a smaller house footprint. And maybe there's a way to get it done without our consideration, but right now I am going to vote against this motion for those reasons.
Hey, thank you. I have a couple people on the list. I have Councillor Parkinson and then Councillor Baxter. I also have had a request that we take a 5-minute health break at some point. I'm not sure how urgent that is needed or not, so I'm just trying to be sensitive to that. So I'm debating between us trying to finish 7.2, or if we feel like this is going to be a longer process, then we need to. Okay. We're going to finish 7.2, and then we'll move on to the next one. Then we'll take a 5-minute health break. So, Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I share the concerns of Councillor Jansen. I certainly did read all the presentations that were made. I was moved by them. The couple of lines in there when people talk about it being the Broadmead or the uplands of our community. I mean, they're right. It's a very nice subdivision, and I'm a huge believer in having a range of subdivisions. Some are sort of starter home subdivisions, some are more established subdivisions, as this one has been. The covenant, I don't know how at the end of the day the covenant will shake out. Again, I've lived a couple times with building schemes. I just thought that's what it was, and everybody followed them, and it was okay. But I don't know what the law will come down and say, and it's regrettable that probably the only way to find out is to have a sort of fractious fight between neighbors and in court, which nobody likes to see. I am concerned about this. I wish it was clearer, but then I bring myself back to, and I have to bring myself back to that what's in front of me is the setback variances that are minor, and I can't really go out on a limb and say I'm upset with the setback variances. They're really related to how we define a front yard and a side yard, and you get a non-standard lot or a cul-de-sac lot, and they don't, you know, the one size fits all doesn't fit all, and so we end up in these situations. So as far as the request for setbacks, I can't in all good conscience say that I'm opposed to that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to, Mr. Coburn, I do see your hand, but unfortunately this is at the council table now. So I will not be coming back to you. Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I think Councillor Day put it very eloquently earlier on in the agenda that we're put in an uncomfortable and inevitable position to adjudicate something like this, and it's not easy. This application is like many others that we've considered in the municipality, in the lagoon, other parts of Colwood. I, like Councillor Jansen, am really sitting on the fence on this one. I guess where I'm coming from is, you know, when I look at the facts that the property owner is willing to risk being challenged on the covenant, the property owner is willing to go so far as to move the house to be able to comply and not require variances. And so when I look at it in through that lens, I try to look at how do we minimize the impact on the neighborhood, and minimizing the impact on the neighborhood means trying not to move the existing dwelling, thereby minimizing the construction and whatnot. And really, and I think Councillor Baxter had mentioned and got some commitment too from the property owner to minimize the height of the building and to keep it at 1 story. And I think I think that's a healthy compromise, and to me, I think would recognize that would have the least amount of impact on the neighborhood, even from a construction standpoint. And I do also acknowledge that there has been some a fair amount of new home construction in the neighborhood, tear downs and rebuilds, and lots of renovations. So you know, the noise, although uncomfortable, is something that's been in the neighborhood for quite a while now. So it's not like it hasn't been experienced. So I will be supporting the application for the reasons that I stated.
Thank you, Councillor Logan. Before I go to Councillor Baxter, I will put my 2 cents in. I'm very concerned, and I think there's unintended consequences that I worry about for the neighbors as well. That if this application was to fail and Mr. Coburn just decided to end up moving the house, he has committed to building a rancher right now, which would definitely lower views, and that we'll have no influence over that if it's being built within the regulations presently. The other thing, it's a very uncomfortable and it's a very unpopular thing to say, and so I hesitate to even say it, but I struggle when people argue about views, because as far as my understanding is, from a city standpoint, we do not make decisions based on protecting established views presently. And if we were to begin to do that, first of all, which views are we protecting? What's a valid view to protect? I don't know. You know, the beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. As well, you know, I have several views that have been blocked by development around me, and if we're suggesting that we should not be building because it's going to block somebody's view, I would suggest that the city of Colwood would not be building at all. And so that has never been a value that I believe in. and it's not a value that I believe the city has focused on as being the primary reason to approve or not approve a project. That is my opinion. I'm not saying that that's council's opinion, but that's certainly mine. Going to Councillor Baxter.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on a couple of things that have been raised. I'll start with the covenant. And I don't think we should ignore the existence of the covenant. On the other hand, there's absolutely no way in which we should be completely guided by the covenant, because that's fettering council's zoning authority. The law completely supports that council could, if it wished, rezone this area for much smaller lot subdivision. I'm not saying we should do that. I'm just saying we have that complete power, covenant or no covenant. And I think that the very existence of that power in the municipal legislation, without any reference to private covenants, makes it ethically correct that we should consider this on all of the normal grounds that we would consider it, which may or may not include views. And moving to that subject and any subject like it, there is absolutely no guidance whatsoever in the law as to what we should think about in this situation. The law states very firmly that anybody who wishes to apply for a rezoning or a variance or anything else has to be considered by council. But there's no guidance in the law as to what we should consider. And I'm sure each one of the seven of us have different views on what we should consider, and I don't think anybody's wrong. However, in this situation, I think there's been a failure to communicate here. It really surprises me that there hasn't been a discussion between the developer and the residents of the idea of, well, would you support a rancher? And that's something that probably the residents should think about seriously, because from what staff is saying, the developer, and anybody who wants to create a new lot is a developer, whatever they say. The developer can do this development without any variances. So the law as it currently stands, according to staff, this development is entirely feasible. The developer would have to go through the expense of moving the house, and the neighborhood would suffer the change to the look of the neighborhood that would produce. And so there's something to be lost and something to be gained on both sides here. And I'd really like to see this matter deferred pending a meeting between both sides. And I would suggest to the developer that he get a facilitator to manage that meeting so that it is conducted in a very constructive and dignified manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just got a couple points to make. My first one is I'm learning this is a really difficult situation we're being put in right now, because, you know, I guess I've learned some things over the past couple of weeks when I was looking to buy some land up north, and I looked at half-acre to acre lots and to build something in the future. And there's other cities that I've or, you know, in other areas where they actually have their own bylaws which control what you can and can't do. For example, this particular lot here is about a half an acre, and that's a minimum you need in two of the cities that I looked at for land to build even a what do you call it, carriage house. And then if you had an acre, you can actually build another house on that, but you need a minimum of an acre. So they actually spell it out to make it easier. The second point I'd like to make is, I guess there's something really fundamental in why I disagreed with this at committee of the whole, and it still rings true to me today. I look at myself as being Mr. Saint Denis, who lives in between. And, with great intention, he moved in there. And if that was my house, I put myself in his shoes. And that's a challenge I give each of the counselors right now is if you were in his shoes and you looked at this and this happened and you bought this house, many years ago with all the intentions of that these were single lots, and then you have this imposed on you, how would you feel? So there's that other dimension, and I know we don't have, metrics that look at that, but I guess in principle, that's why I have issues with this. Anyways, thank you very much.
Thank you. I will look to council for a motion. I'm sorry, Councillor Baxter.
I'd like to move that this development variance application be deferred pending further discussions between the proponent and the neighbors. Hopefully, well, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. I guess I will look to staff. I just want to confirm. I'm not saying, Michael, it isn't appropriate, but is that an appropriate motion?
Just for clarity, and thank you very much for the question, Chair, Mayor Martin. Would it be the intention of council that we return to council and reconsider the variance, or return to council with an update from the public's perspective, or just a little bit of clarity on what your expectation is to reply, because the developer will be asking me tomorrow.
Councillor Baxter, it's your motion.
Yeah, so. The intent of this motion is that it does indeed return to council, and that both sides report out on their mutual discussions, and then council make a decision after we've heard that.
Thank you.
Second the motion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Day. Councillor Day has seconded that. Mr. Moeller, are you? Is that enough clarity for you?
Yeah, thank you very much. It is enough clarity. It means that we're here. The variance is tabled essentially until we return with some updated information. I appreciate the clarity.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on the motion? Councillor Day.
No, sorry, I just had my hand up to second.
Oh, okay, thank you. Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I will call the question then. Any opposed? Please raise your hand. There is no one opposed. Moving on. Oh, no, excuse me. We are going to recess for 5 minutes. So I have 9:13 right now. If we could please return for 9:20. We'll give everybody a 5-minute break. Okay, it is 9:20. Marcy, can you bring us back, please? Thank you. We got two Councillor Jensens. Councillor Jensen, thank you. Okay, we are back. So we are now back to 7.3, which is Royal Bay, Latoria South, OCP, and zoning amendments. This is a recommendation from the April 20th Committee of the Whole meeting. Dennis Carlson is planner, will be providing a presentation, and then Gablecraft has also requested that they provide additional comments following the slide presentation.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just get us set up here. Is everybody able to see that?
No. Yes.
Got it?
Yeah,
We're good?
we're not in presentation mode yet.
There
Yeah, there we are.
Okay, we're okay. Everybody can see that, and then you can hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the reason for this staff presentation is primarily to provide council some more information regarding the proposed residential and non-residential components of Latoria South in particular. Recognizing that Royal Beach, the status of Royal Beach has changed somewhat lately, but staff have still included this for some context. Our hope is that the information we're going to provide in this presentation will help council in their consideration of the item that's on your agenda tonight. So the overview that I'll be providing is basically touching on the Royal Bay plan that was adopted in 2017. And I'll make some comments regarding what was considered there in terms of the commercial and residential development. Then
So-
the official, sorry.
Sorry, Dennis, I'm going to stop you just for a moment. Councillor Day has her hand up. Councillor Day, did you have a question?
Sorry, yes, I just, I have a request that we could please not talk about Royal Beach because they have withdrawn their application at this time. So it's very confusing because on the one hand, we had the statement at last council from yourself that they have withdrawn their application, and yet it is on our agenda. And I've had more than 2 calls about that. So I'm just asking if there's some reason why we must keep Royal Beach on there.
I'm going to look to our Mr. Earl.
Thank you, Your Worship. As council is aware, Royal Beach has recently suspended an application that they had to amend the official community plan and their zoning in the area. Notwithstanding their decision to suspend, Royal Beach has current zoning in that area. And so as council considers the OCP vision for Royal Bay in general and Latoria South specifically this evening, the context of what's currently allowed at Royal Beach and what was recently proposed at Royal Beach could help council consider the Latoria South proposal. That's why we refer to it in the presentation this evening, both in terms of what is currently allowed, and we also reference what was recently proposed, because that proposal is merely suspended at this point and could be unsuspended at some time in the future or amended and resubmitted accordingly.
Any, okay, before we move on?
That's all for me.
Okay, thank you. Then I'll go back to Mr. Carlton.
Thank you, Your Worship. So as I mentioned, a brief overview of the official community plan, particularly as it refers to the Seaside Village concept or designation, then get into some more detail regarding primarily Latoria South with some context regarding Royal Beach. Then on to the commercial absorption studies, which is what staff requested as part of these applications. And then finally, some comments about the Latoria Corridor traffic study. So beginning with the Royal Bay Area Plan, as I've mentioned before in my presentations, this was adopted in 2017. It did reference a target of the minimum of 8,000 square feet of commercial space within Royal Bay, and that's the entire Royal Bay area. And with the potential for up to 2,800 dwellings, again, within the entire Royal Bay area. So that's sort of the context that we're dealing with here. But prior to the adoption of the official community plan in 2018, which included the Seaside Village designation for both the Commons and Latoria South and the Landing and Royal Beach. And these had a much different intent in staff's view in terms of the direction that council wanted to take. It was basically identified as one of two primary centers for cultural, civic, economic, and public life within the city, and that it was also to be a major focus of residential and commercial growth. And I should also note that in the current OCP, in the Royal Bay Plan section, there is acknowledgement that the policies of the Royal Bay Plan should be updated to be in line with the official community plan. I think at this point, because I've heard comments from the residents about how this does not comply with the vision that they worked on during the adoption of the OCP, and I think it's very important from a staff perspective to make the distinction between the 2017 Royal Bay Plan and the direction that was provided by council in the 2018 official community plan as I've described it. And it is that intention in the Seaside Village policies that staff are taking in terms of direction for the amount of commercial and residential development that would be potentially supportable in the Commons, I should say Latoria South, and also at some point or other Royal Beach. So getting into some more of the details in terms of the proposed development, I've listed here the residential ranges that are being proposed for both Latoria South, Royal Beach. Oh, and I should point out Latoria South, the applicant has indicated that they are prepared to commit to a maximum of 2,100 units, which would be in concert with what was considered as part of the traffic study. Royal Beach, just very quickly, was proposing 2,850 dwellings. It's worth noting that the current zoning allows for 926 dwellings. There's a math mistake. It shouldn't be 5550 max. It should actually be 4950 max. But in any event, staff are of the position that this number of dwellings aligns with the Seaside Village designation in terms of creating a major center for both commercial and residential development within Colwood. In terms of the non-residential, and by non-residential, as I've noted on the slide here, what we're referring to is a range of retail, grocery, office, professional personal service, and institutional uses. And again, Latoria South is proposing a broad range of floor space, as with the landing in Royal Beach, with a total of somewhere between 1.1 and 1.2 million if they both proceeded, and just about 268,000 to 376,000 if Latoria proceeded on their own. The other point to make here is that I referenced the 80,000 square feet in the Royal Bay plan. That actually was based primarily on retail uses, and that number in the current Royal Bay plan did not consider additional types of uses such as service, commercial, institutional, those sorts of uses, which would be in addition to those 80,000. So drilling down into the application for Latoria South in a little bit more detail. So for the common, the proposal is approximately 110,000 square feet of retail, which I should note includes about a 40,000 square foot grocery store, and also an additional 80,000 square feet of office and other types of employment uses. And in addition to that, the applicant is considering that they will be pursuing additional institutional and civic uses. The applicant has also indicated that the first phase, which is the shopping 75,000 square foot shopping center approximately, including the grocery store, would, as I mentioned, would be in that first phase of the development. So moving on to the absorption study. Now, the reason staff requested these absorption studies for both Latoria South and for Royal Beach is to provide a little bit of a ground truthing to the numbers that were being proposed, and to get essentially another opinion as to whether that range of uses and the extent of uses was actually warranted in the market. So you can see the absorption study that was done by Colliers said that out to 2038, there's about 117,000 square feet of retail, food and beverage, and service commercial that was warranted. It should be noted a couple of things. One is that retail study, that absorption study, did not include other types of non-residential uses like hotel, institutional, civic uses, those sorts of things. The other point to note here is that this Collier study assumed that Royal Beach was being developed under its current zoning. So there's quite a difference between those assumptions with Royal Beach as proposed and Royal Beach under the current zoning. So very quickly, the Urbanic study that was done for Royal Beach talked about 960,000 roughly of non-residential uses, which is fairly well in line with what they were proposing, about 868. There was some indication at the time that they were prepared to do about 40,000 square feet within the landing as the first phase, but that has not yet been committed to. So turning to the Latoria Corridor traffic study, which was considered by council back in January of this year, and included the resolution that you can see on your screen instructing staff to come back with a development cost charge bylaw based on the joint study. It's worth noting that that joint study, as I'm sure you all remember, modeled the traffic volumes based on the potential rezonings, not only for Latoria South and Royal Beach, but other developments through the Latoria Corridor. And that is part of the reason that the applicant has indicated that they want to cap the number of dwellings at 2,100, which is essentially the data that went into that joint study. And also based on those potential build outs, there was a number of timing triggers established for the roadworks. So in conclusion, that's the staff presentation. And as Mayor Martin has mentioned, the applicant would like to address council and make some additional comments. So I will turn off my share screen at this point.
And just before we let somebody from Gablecraft speak, Councillor Parkinson has his hand up.
Thank you, Your Worship. Excuse me. I'm just looking for clarity. The Urbanic study, those numbers, 300,000 square feet retail, 200,000 office, do they reflect the Urbanics prediction for Royal Beach or for Royal Beach and Royal Bay combined?
Royal Beach.
Okay. Thank you.
Dennis?
Yes.
Please keep going.
Okay, as I said, that concludes the staff presentation. And as I mentioned, the applicant has requested the ability to address council with some additional comments.
So go ahead, Lance.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. We didn't intend to really provide additional comments so much as we wanted to be available to council to answer specific questions they may have. One on the density cap, two on the retail intent, and as well anything else that you might be worried about in terms of voting on this motion this evening. So I have with me Dan Wong, principal from Urban Systems, who's been our lead planner on the file as a consultant. So Dan and I are here and available to answer questions for you this evening.
Great. Thank you. I will go to Councillor Baxter, then Kobayashi. Councillor Baxter, can you unmute?
I just want to make sure everybody understands that you're not picking me first because my name begins with a B, but because I get my hand up first.
Yep.
I want to address the members of the public to some extent first, and then I have a question for staff. And that's to repeat some of what you said, Your Worship, that we do read everything submitted and we listen to everything said. And hearing and understanding what's being said is a very different thing than wholesale adopting it. And I think more conversation with the public would be a good idea. And I did, in fact, give Mr. English my card the very first time I saw him speak on this subject, and asked him to contact me because I don't have his contact information. But unfortunately, he hasn't done that. But every councillor's phone number is on the website, and it's there for a reason. It's so that you can phone us. And you know, I'm sitting here pretty lonely because nobody's phoned me. But I have made attempts to get contact, and I really would like to have contact with, and because some really important things to discuss. Just give you one example. Almost everybody you talk to says there should be a world-class development, particularly with reference to Royal Beach. And everybody probably has a different idea exactly what that means. And I'm trying to talk to as many people as I can. I talk to people I know about what does that mean, world class? What does that mean to you? I've talked to some counselors as well. And I'd really like to have discussions like that with people who are interested, because there's no way that sitting here at council, we can ensure that you get a world-class development. We don't know what you mean by that. There's got to be detail to it. Okay, having said all that, the recommendation is that the appropriate amendments to the land use bylaw and the official community plan be prepared in order to create a sub-area plan. So I want to ask staff, when that sub-area plan is brought back to council, I'm assuming that it will indicate, for instance, where this commercial will be. So far, other than informal discussions, we haven't been given that officially at council. And so hence my question.
Through you, your worship, yes, Councillor Baxter, the sub-area plan will outline the areas of major retail as well as the other uses. And we are working actively with the applicant on that. I should point out too that in addition to land use policies, we are also contemplating specific design guidelines that would apply to Latoria South.
Okay, thank you. So I would say that so far we're all actually heading in the same direction as the public is asking for. We just need a lot more detail, and I understand that developers want to see general agreement before they start spending money on detail, and obviously now we're getting close to spending money on detail. And that is, where some of the real discussions will be had. So I'll be voting in favor of this as soon as I can. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Mayor Martin. I am in agreement with Councillor Day's comments. The whole Royal Beach thing is confusing the crap out of me, to tell you the truth, because they're not here to answer the questions specific to their development. But let's just talk about the Royal Bay development. Number one, I see a lot of good faith movement by Royal Bay, as far as I'm concerned. The original going from 2,700 dwellings down to 2,100 as a minimum. I think they are listening. That's about a 22% decrease. So that's pretty darn significant to me. And I think the other issue, if you read the Royal Bay Homeowners Association's comments, I think they're so close. I mean, everything is so close that we're all talking the same language, but I think there's something lost in the translation, because obviously one of the other big things about what's happening too is I see a significant increase in the non-residential, which is positive, which is a comment that has been made by the Homeowners Association and the citizens. They want to see more of that commercial stuff. And I think, I believe, at risk, what the Royal Bay development is doing right now is going at risk with the shopping plaza, specifically the grocery store is something being done in good faith. They're going to be here for the long term. That's how I see things right now. But I do agree with Councillor Baxter. I'm seeing a lot of positives now. And the other key thing that was made very clear tonight was that 2,100 dwellings does now correspond to the 2,100 dwellings that were in the traffic report used for their portion. So I'm glad to see that. Now things are starting to make sense to me. So a little more logic right now. And as you said in the beginning, Mayor Martin, I think it's a great idea that the Homeowners Association call you and then make an appointment with Nora and have that meeting with you and staff, because I think, we're all talking the same, but I think there's something lost in translation. Anyways, that's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Day, then Jensen.
Great, thank you. I'm still very troubled by the fact that Royal Beach is still in the title that goes with the motion that's been recommended by staff. So I'm wondering if staff could assure me that Royal Beach will not be grandfathered in some way by being included in the title of the motion.
Through you, your worship, the staff presentation that was given to you tonight referenced the Royal Beach. But just for clarity, the staff report with the attached recommendation only refers to Latoria South. Royal Beach has already been considered by council back in February, I believe.
What do you mean has already been considered?
Your worship, I'm just looking at my minutes here. Give me a minute. So Royal Beach was presented to council committee of the whole February 3rd, and there was and then it was advanced to council after that with a council motion. So it has already been moved on by council.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not going to get caught up in that because it's late, but that confuses me.
So just to help tonight, Councillor Day, if we were to look at the actual, and I understand you're just talking about the title, but if you were to look at the recommendation that's coming from staff, the first paragraph basically says that the appropriate amendments to land use bylaw and the official community plan be prepared in order to create a sub-area plan for Latoria South. It doesn't refer to Royal Bay at all, or excuse me, Royal Beach. So that should give you some assurances. It's in the recommendation.
Okay, so and my next question is for Lance, and I just wanted to ask if Gablecraft would be willing to consider noise attenuation as part of the Latoria South design guidelines, because that is a major issue that's been raised by residents.
Councillor, through the chair and to Councillor Day, the short answer is yes. We're always interested in best practice. I think the longer answer is it's definitely something that we have to work out in the details. You know, I think there's some things that have been proposed by the Royal Bay Homeowners Association that, you know, I think are fairly crude in how they've been proposed, but there are specifics in terms of articulation to the buildings, the stepping back and forth of surfaces, how we break up the buildings, where we put the breaks, where we put the driveways that could serve to do that. And just like council, when the Royal Bay Homeowners Association does submit a presentation in writing, we've circulated that within our group and we've alerted them to their concerns, particularly around the townhouse development along Latoria. So I think there are some things that we would be willing to engage on to mitigate that. They probably wouldn't look exactly like the things that the Royal Bay Homeowners Association's proposing right now.
Okay, well, we're goal oriented. We're just all working our way through the projects. So thank you for that. I yield back to the chair.
Thank you, Councillor Day. Councillor Jensen.
Thank you, Your Worship. I see, I won't reiterate what other people have said, but the bottom line is I see a lot of positive moves here and some real concessions on the part of the developer. And I agree with Councillor Kobayashi that I think we're getting close on, and I look forward to some of the finer details and some input from our community. I do have a specific question, and I'm not sure if it's for staff or the applicant, but the transportation, we've had a lot of Vunt and Watt and you name it. What standard will be the expectation as far as the transportation goes? My concern is this: we build it to a lesser standard based on the fewer doors, and then 2 years later, Royal Beach blows up and adds 15,000 cars, and next thing you know, we're tearing up Latoria Road twice. What checks and balances are built into this to avoid this situation?
So if I may take that, and through the chair, the checks and balances for the transportation study that we've received, especially the joint memo, because it's predicated on densities, Royal Beach coming in or out of the project only has a factor of extending the timeline. So if they don't realize the densities that are fully captured in that joint memo, then we push off the timeline where those works and services and needs well off into the future. But ultimately, that study is based upon densities, not on actualities or timeline in terms of, this must be built by 2022 or 2038. It's based on the progression of density. And so we'll be able to monitor that. And yes, it may be that for the short term, Royal Bay South is carrying those density targets on their own, and they'll be the leader in that. However, if we continue to move on our initiative on the DCC program, there'll also be recoverables on that light as well. And the improvement in terms of the standard wouldn't amend beyond that, which if council has already seen, which is the 4-lane ultimate geometrics with 5-lane enablements for portions of Latoria.
So it sounds like we're on top of it.
Yeah, the joint memo is a qualitative stance that wouldn't change based upon people coming in and out. It would just mean faster or slower. That's right.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. And I'll be supporting this and looking forward to the more informative, detailed area plan.
Thank you, Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Actually, a fascinating evening tonight when we look at, we're talking about the Royal Bay, and just for Councillor Day, I think if you look at the agenda, 7.3.1 was a presentation that did talk about Royal Beach, but I think we're on 7.3.2, which is just Royal Bay, Latoria South. So I think in the what we're actually dealing with has been separated from Royal Beach, which, like you, I think is where we want to be right now. But it's interesting that it seems like almost tiny little baby steps where we're doing all this. We've had Royal Bay in front of us a number of times in the last year or so, and now we're at the point where we're going to ask them to prepare a sub-area plan. And I'm sure as a developer, it feels like death by 1,000 cuts. I mean, we're sort of moving forward in absolute baby steps. And at the same time, we hear the homeowner saying, "Oh my God, the freight train's coming at us down the track way too fast, slow down." And it probably tells us that we're in good hands with our staff, that they're stick handling a very complex process in about the right way and in the right time frame. So I do regret that we're all sort of social distancing and isolating, because I know in the early days, one of the letters from the Royal Bay homeowners, I had popped a response to Mr. English saying, let's have a cup of coffee as soon as this dies down, and maybe the cup of coffee is just around the corner, but hopefully soon we can start to have some of those chats and narrow down or at least focus in on where there are differences and where there's just some communication needed. So I'm going to support the motion, but I will ask for an amendment where we just include the 2,100 unit cap in here, because I think, again, like Councillor Kobayashi, that ties in with the traffic study, that takes the confusion out of it, and that gives me the comfort that I would like. And of course, I'm very comforted to hear that that's something the developer is on side with. So I don't think there'll be a controversial amendment, but I would be making that amendment once the motion's on the floor.
All right, thank you. Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Worship. Well, maybe Councillor Parkinson can go and have that coffee at the pop-up coffee shop that is envisioned and hopefully opening soon down there. I do want to say that I think we should really be encouraged that we're even having this discussion, given the current economic climate. So, I think Gablecraft wanting to make an investment in their community is encouraging, and it speaks volumes. And I think we ought to be encouraging that. So I did hear that this project meets the objectives of the OCP. I guess, although I hear the 2,100 cap, what can you remind me what would be allowed under the OCP, Dennis?
Through
Right
your,
off the top here?
the current, under the current OCP, the Seaside Village designation references a range of floor area ratio from 1.75 to 3.5. It does not have an absolute number similar to what's currently in the Royal Bay Plan.
Okay. So I will say that I'll echo my colleagues that there's a lot of positives here, and Gablecraft has proved themselves already in Latoria North. So I expect that the same good work will continue. And I walk the neighborhood 2 to 3 times a week. And the one thing that people do say is, for heaven's sakes, just get on with the commercial part, because we need a grocery store, and whatever you need to do to make that happen, just do it. So, so I know, talking to Gablecraft in the past, they need this to do some planning for the infrastructure works, and I'm hoping that that they can get on with that should this motion pass. So I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. First time speakers, it's myself, and then I will go to Councillor Day as a second time. I just want to reiterate what I heard from Councillor Logan just now as well. So, and 2017 and anything prior to 2017, the Royal Bay Area Plan basically required 2,800 dwellings all across Royal Bay, which was north, south, and beach. My understanding of the 2018 OCP, as you stated, Dennis, that it's expressed as an FSR, which is a 1.75 to 3.5. An estimate that I received through Urban Systems was that basically represented roughly between 5,900 and 9,000 dwellings across Latoria South and Royal Beach. With the current zoning applications, even if at 2,100 for Latoria South, and even if Royal Beach did not pull, they would be at 2,850, which would be a total of 4,950, which is about 1,000 residents less than what the OCP presently states that we should be working towards. And I would like staff to just clarify, are those numbers correct or am I incorrect?
Your Worship, I'm aware of that that data table. I haven't had a chance, to be honest, to go through and sort of follow the math on that one. I think it just needs to have some caution, as I mentioned, because the FAR, it's difficult to, although I congratulate Urban Systems for attempting it, it's very problematic and difficult to take an FAR and extend it across an entire site like Latoria South. So those are usually meant to apply on a site-by-site basis.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna need, it's 9:57, so before I go to Councillor Day, I'm just gonna need a motion to go past 11 or past 10, excuse me.
So moved.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Parkinson, seconded by Councillor Kobayashi. I'll call the question. Any in opposition? Councillor Day, I know you had your hand up before, so I'm not sure if you're opposing this or not. I'm assuming not.
No, I'm not.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we will go past 10. It is now Councillor Day's opportunity.
Thank you. Sorry, I had forgotten in, of course, my too many pieces of paper. I have a couple of amendments that I would like to suggest. And one is specifically regarding parks in the recommendation on page 5 of our agenda. it talks about that the developer will provide a park plan. And I would just like to amend that to include showing pathway connections and their accessibility per the user-friendly trail toolkit. So I'm not imposing a hard standard, just a way of describing what's there on the trails.
So Councillor Day, I'm just going to stop you just for a moment, because what I'd like to do is either have a motion, and then what we'll do is we'll start making amendments to that motion, or we'll have an motion with that includes your amendments. So however people want to go about this, but I think I'd like to get the main motion, and then we'll start working on amendments to that motion.
Perfect.
After. So how about we go with, we do have a staff recommendation. Do I have a mover and seconder on that? And then we'll work towards amendments on those. So Councillor Logan has made the motion. Councillor Jensen has seconded it. So then we will go to discussion on the motion. I know Councillor Parkinson also wanted to make amendments, but I'll stay with Councillor Day first. So Councillor Day, you made that first motion. Why don't you go ahead and make that first amendment motion?
Okay, so my motion is to amend the portion of the staff recommendation on parks, adding after park plan, showing pathway connections and their accessibility per the user-friendly trail toolkit to other local parks and trails.
Okay, may I have a seconder to that? Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Baxter. Is there any discussion on that motion? And sorry, my apologies. What I'm going to do is I'm going to clear everybody's hands because I realize there's a whole bunch of motions. So please, on this amendment, if you wish to speak to this specific amendment, please put your hand up again. I'm just giving everybody a moment. Okay, nobody seems to want to speak to this amendment, so I will call the question on this amendment. Any in opposition? Seeing none, that amendment passes. Councillor Day? Did you have another motion?
Thank you. Yes. That the applicant, Gablecraft, be asked to consider noise attenuation as part of the Latoria South Design Guidelines. And I have vetted that with staff, that was the best way to deal with that issue.
Okay. Do I have a seconder to that motion? Councillor Kobayashi? So again, my apologies. I'm going to clear. I said Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Kobayashi. So on this motion, is there any discussion? I'm seeing no hand. Oh, wait a second. I do see a hand. So that is Councillor Kobayashi. Councillor Kobayashi on this amendment.
Yes. So which you're including, Cynthia, Councillor Day, is also that wind tunnel effect, right? Is
yes.
That all? Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other, so I will call the question on that amendment. Is there anyone in opposition? Seeing none, that amendment passes. Councillor Day.
And that's good for me. I'll leave the floor to Councillor Parkinson's amendment, I think.
Okay, thank you. I think I also saw Councillor Kobayashi's hand up. I will go to Councillor Parkinson first, and then I will go to Councillor Kobayashi.
I'm fine.
Okay, Councillor Parkinson.
I would just like to make an amendment on the recommendations after the end of the section on Corey. After the line 10,000 square meters to 15,000 square meters of non-residential uses, I would like to add a line that says up to a maximum of 2,100 dwelling units.
Okay, do I have a seconder to that? No, that was Councillor Parkinson. Councillor Kobayashi has seconded that. So discussion on that motion. I'm just going to clear everybody's hands again. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I will call the question. Any in opposition? Oh, I'm sorry. Dennis, Mr. Carlson would like to just comment on it. Go ahead, Dennis.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a point of clarification, and I may be pulling in the applicant for this one. The 2100 actually applies to not only the quarry, but the commons and the transition. It's the entire site. So I just want to make sure council is clear is that we're not just talking 2100 in the quarry, it's 2100 in Latoria South.
Yeah. Councillor.
Yeah, that was the belief.
Okay,
That's what I was trying to say. I guess I would have assumed the bullet was going to be moved left from the bullets under quarry, so.
So I think we all understand that motion is regarding to Latoria South. I see a hand, which is Councillor Day.
Thank you. I think that Councillor Kobayashi's comment should be captured in the previous amendment. So when we finish this, can we come back and I just have a quick wording amendment to deal with the wind as well as the noise?
Okay. So coming back to Councillor Parkinson's amendment, is there any other discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question on that amendment. Any in opposition? Seeing none, Councillor Day.
Thank you. I would like to amend my amendment. Sorry, get my page to come to the right spot. It read that the applicant Gavelcraft be asked to consider noise attenuation and wind tunnel effects is my amendment as part of the Latoria South design guidelines.
Okay, I have a motion to amend the amendment. Do I have a seconder to that? Councillor Kobayashi has seconded that. Discussion? Councillor Logan looks perplexed.
Well, I just wonder how we operationalize that, how we put that into place, and whether, although it sounds nice, how do we stop the wind in a very windy spot? So I'm just not sure it's realistic. That's all.
Okay. Councillor Jensen.
Yeah, I don't have a definition before me on what a bloody wind tunnel is. I picture experimental aircraft in a tunnel somewhere. So I have a tough time with that. I mean, if the developer assures me that this is a factor that they'll discuss with staff and come back in their plan, I'm probably good with that.
All right, thank you. Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's basically it's a design criteria. You're just trying to minimize it, Councillor Jensen, and you can use, just like an aircraft, you can use strakes on buildings. Isn't that cool? Anyways, yes. So it's not, hardcore. We come up with the design criteria to do that, but it's just a concern of the citizens. So we look at it. We'll look at it the best we can. What's physically possible. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the amendment to the amendment? Seeing none, I will call the question. Any in opposition? Councillor Logan opposes. So is there any other, excuse me, there's another hand up. Councillor Jensen, did you oppose or did you have another amendment?
I was a late opposer.
You were a late opposer. Thank you. So please note that it was Councillor Logan and Councillor Jensen who opposed. Seeing no other amendments, I'm going to go back to the main motion. If there's no other discussion, I'm just waiting. I'm going to call the question. Okay, I'm going to call the question on the main motion. Any in opposition? Seeing none, the motion passes. Moving on to 7.4 Royal Bay Fire Hall. Councillor Day, did you have a comment before we do?
I just want to let you know that you didn't see my virtual hand, but I did end up having to be opposed to the motion.
Oh, you opposed? Okay.
Yes.
So staff, please note that Councillor Day opposed the motion. Moving on then to 7.4. Staff? Oh, excuse me, hold on. There is a recommendation from the April 20th Committee of the Whole, and staff are available for questions. So we do have a recommendation in front of us. Do I have a mover and seconder? And then we'll look for discussion after that. I have Councillor Logan has moved it. Councillor Jensen has seconded it. Any discussion? And sorry, I'm going to clear everybody's hands just for a moment. My apologies. So please put up your hands again. Councillor Day.
Thank you. Well, I'm not muted. Good. I'm a little concerned about the triggers for the fire hall. I have no problem with the development cost charge. That makes sense to me. But I did forward some questions to the fire chief, if he's available to answer them. I'm just wondering, it might be best to define the need for the new hall by the fire department's response times rather than the number of homes that are built. So I'm just wondering about that, what the anticipated cost of the new fire hall was and how many homes would need to be built in order to fund that fire hall. The last question that I have is about serving other parts of Colwood and whether or not there are plans to utilize Applegate Road, which is in the northwest corner of Royal Bay. It's a gazetted road owned by the city, and whether or not that would be used for fire access.
Our fire chief is available, so his hand's up, so I will go to him. Chief?
Thank you, through the chair. Hopefully I have Councillor Day's questions here, and I hope I can answer to her satisfaction. So the first one was, okay, so the original planning, where this came from, the original planning started in the early 2000s, earnestly in 2003, with several in-council reports about dispositions of various pieces of land within the community. In the early 2000s, we did identify that the concern was that the density of growth in Colwood Corners, that has not happened. Even though Ani is building, it is nowhere near the density and growth that was originally proposed. The second portion of that was that the Royal Bay lands were at that time zoned for build out of approximately, if my memory serves, roughly 2,500 homes. So it was identified in the early 2000s that to support the current delivery model that we have with the Colwood Fire Department, that is a volunteer and combination model. Additional fire halls would be needed and placed in primarily access through residential areas, so we could draw from that residential component to staff our apparatus and aid the response time. Part of the issue with the response time is currently our response time average over the entire year is 7 minutes. That is from page to door. We do know that our longest run that we have is a 12-minute run from our current station. So we do know that response times, even though we are making the average response time at 90% of the time, 10 minutes or less, there are times that we need other avenues to make our response time. Part of that is nighttime response. So our current service delivery model does not staff the fire hall at night. Because we do not have it is quite a costly venture to go that next step. So what we decided on early on was to see what areas that we could cut down on that response time. And that response time would be the time from the pagers going off and the volunteers coming to the hall. So if we could cut down that portion of the response time, we would again be able to keep our response standards as the traffic volumes increased and traffic congestion. The next question you had was regarding response time. So currently right now is by the numbers. So 2018 to 2019 increase in incidents. So this is before COVID, was a 20% annual increase. And that's what we were looking at. Early numbers for the beginning of the 3 months of this year, we're on track for that again. COVID-19 has definitely altered our response statistics since then. Last year we did 760 calls with 1,163 apparatus movements, and we made our response time 90% of the time. So hopefully that answers that question. By the numbers, you had a question about costs of a proposed Royal Bay Fire Hall. The initial needs assessment needs that we looked at was a fire hall similar to the size of Langford Hall number 2 over on Happy Valley Road. That is approximately 6,800 square feet, so 6,000 square foot footprint with an internal an extra 800 square foot mezzanine of storage space. The estimated build cost that we've managed to get was compiled by Chris Payne, the previous CFO, to talk to within his peer group, and it was pegged at approximately $500 a square foot. So that equates to a rough build cost of 3.4 million. That is including build and servicing, but not land costs. Internal review from staff has estimated a land cost of approximately $700,000 to $800,000 unless other arrangements to defer land costs could be made. The original projection was, where am I looking here at my notes? So the projected build out at the entire South Colwood, and that was including the original intention for Royal Beach, would cover the majority of the projected costs, but we would be a little bit short for the land costs itself. So hopefully that answers that portion. Where we came up with the 30% as a point that staff would come back to council and say, council, I think this is the time that we start looking at this as a trigger, was based on the traffic studies and congestion reports from the Bunt and Watt and internal discussions at staff level. It had been identified that at approximately 30% of a build out, or approximately 2,200 homes on the original plan, that major road and traffic intersection upgrades would have to be undertaken. So that is where the 30% came from. It would be in conjunction with other major projects that needed to be considered by council as we move forward. Councillor Day, was there anything else that I missed?
Just whether or not you had considered Applegate.
So Applegate is a road dedication. Brent can help me if I'm wrong here. Is a road dedication, but the road does not actually exist at this time due to its nature up the slope. It wasn't envisioned as part of the fire department response, because I'm not aware if the future sections of Royal Bay as it develops actually incorporates that road dedication.
Okay, so if I heard you correctly, it would take pretty much all of the development of Royal Bay to pay for the fire hall, but we would start looking at it when 30% build out had arrived.
Correctly. This is a plan to move forward. Certainly there are major decisions that council would have to make in the future, but this is the beginning opening steps. And as things move forward, there would certainly be input from to council saying, is this something that council wanted to proceed in this direction?
Great. Thank you so much.
Is there any other questions for the chief before I look for a motion? Seeing none, may I have a motion? Please, Councillor Jensen. Are you going to move the staff recommendation, Councillor Jensen? Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Anyone?
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Parkinson. Any other discussion? Councillor Jensen? No? Oh, sorry, that was just her hand popped up again. Sorry. Okay, then I will call the question. Any in opposition? Seeing none, that motion passes. Moving on to 7.5. This is regarding Lookout Brook Dam upgrade update. And staff are here to introduce the item.
Thank you very much, Chair Mayor Martin. I'd like to introduce Helen Lockhart, our city engineer, who will be addressing any comments, and both Helen and I are here to answer any questions that council may have. Helen?
Thank you, Brent, and thank you, Your Worship. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation prepared, but I would like to share the screen with the images from the briefing. So can you all see that okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so this shows the footprints of the proposed buttressing for the dam. These shaded areas are flat areas. And this shows that all of the work will be contained within Colwood, as this is the boundary between Langford and Colwood. So this shows a typical cross section, and it shows that the crest will be raised slightly. This is the full supply level of the dam, and that's at the level of the spillway. So in the winter, the water level will be at this level or higher, and it will cover the upstream berm. But in the summer, when the water level goes down, this will be dry, so people will be able to walk or sit on it. And this is the schedule that the consultant submitted to us. And we're about here on it, about May 11th. There's still work for the environmental consultants to do to get approvals from the province and federal government and other environmental works. And the consultant's currently working on preparing 90% design drawings, technical specifications, and a Class A estimate. And we're expected to get those by May 25th. And once they're reviewed and finalized, the project will go out to tender. And I just wanted to note that our consultant didn't realize that this project would have to be awarded by council. And the first council meeting after the tenders are submitted will be August 31st. So we estimated construction starting about September 8th and being complete by November 2nd. So are there any questions?
Councillor Day.
Okay. Oh, just a moment, I lost myself for a minute there. I just wanted to ask, for many residents, this is a destination that is dear to their hearts. So when it's complete, according to the drawings, it looks like it's going to be quite rocky. Will there be any sandy layer there at all for the enjoyment of the kids and the families who go down there?
Yeah, through the chair, the top of the upstream berm, it will be, I'm not sure if it'll be sand, but it'll be some kind of finer granular layer, so people will be able to walk or sit on it.
Great.
I don't know if it'll be as sandy as what's there now, but yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jensen.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I too had the same question. Further to the aggregate that's on top, maybe we can, if this is the right time, express our or at least mine, and obviously Councillor Day's thoughts that I believe sand has been placed there over the years and it is enjoyed by young families galore in the summer. And I think we should insist on some type of aggregate that is suitable for that kind of use. I'm not the engineer. We had a deep discussion about rock fill and ditches last week, and I don't want to put a name to a particular substrate, but I do think that staff should be live to that when the RFP goes out, that our expectation is a certain type of material on the very top. Further to that, I can't tell, freely admit I have an arts degree, not an engineering ring, but I would like to hear explain what that grade might look like. I'm just thinking little kids wading into the water here.
I see Mr. Mueller had his hand up before you asked that question, so maybe he could answer both.
Thank you much, Mayor Martin. This is something that's near and dear, and I know many council members have reached out and expressed concern about what the swimming environment is going to look like. And there's been some recent input from our consulting team on this. And, interestingly enough, in terms of the environment, the fish strategy, and how various bodies are relating to COVID-19, some of our accessibility to some of our partners is a little bit restricted. So we're having to look at some of the environmental considerations with alternate approaches. And one thing that I do feel is pertinent to talk about is the fish habitat enhancements that have been raised by the consulting team while we're trying to work through interim measures, because we're not getting direct feedback to some approving agencies COVID restrictions. So the fish habitat that is in the lake body itself is a habitat for spawning area for rainbow trout. So in regards to that spawning intent for the fish, the environmental consultants is advised that we're going to need some woody debris, and I'll read it directly: tree stumps, large limbs, and placement of specifically sized spawning gravels, which is very, very different than the sort of sand light layers. These are typical, as Helen described it, a little bit more gravelly, a little bit more weighty. But it means that the environmental necessities for how that engagement is at the shoreline is going to drive that ultimate surface, where we can get the top dressing of the dam to be far more softer material. The actual swimming platform may be a little bit coarse, as Helen advises, so it can have a bit of weight to it. And the consultant advises, and we're still in the early stages, that it may affect some of the recreational access from the dam for swimming, just because it's a little bit more coarse under the feet. However, the intention to create a beach, create a swimmable platform, and create a swimmable environment is still overt. I just wanted to share this because it was subject to some questions just today, and we received this very recently, and it was reviewed by staff literally today and yesterday. Questions are welcome.
Thanks for that, Brent. I understand we're not building a swimming pool here, so we'll have to just get what we get. But you know what it's like if you don't specify these things ahead of time. Next thing you know, we got 3/4 crush there, and the contractor's running for the hills. So I do want to make sure, and it sounds like you're conveying our thoughts to the consultant. So that's great. I want to fast forward a little bit, and I know I spoke to staff about this today. Beyond the dam and the remediation, I think there's an excellent opportunity here for us to consider some upgrades. It's a small park. It's not a huge area. I was up there just recently walking the area, and I mean, there's one picnic table and a biffy. I mean, I think now would be our opportunity, once this work is completed, to consider upgrading that. And I know we're awaiting the Parks Master Plan, but I do want to throw that out there, that I think we should be considering some benches for elderly or tired walkers, and or for parents who are supervising young kids. we can do better than one picnic table, I think, and we should file that on the agenda for the future.
Through the chair, no problem at all. Thank you for that feedback. And also want to note that your statements about that beach and that desire will certainly be mentioned to the consultant team and won't be lost. So that's not lost, and I'll remember to bring something back for 2021 budget consideration for improvements to the park.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter, then Parkinson.
I'd like to thank Councillor Jensen for his comments regarding us elderly folk and our need for benches. I assume that the rock that has to be hauled in, there's quite a lot of it, will be hauled in off Batting Place. I'm not aware of any other possible entrance. Could I have a response from staff on that?
Helen and I aren't fast enough on the queues, but yeah, we'll be meeting with all the access points. So the majority of access points are actually in the city of Langford's jurisdiction. And so we've scheduled or are attempting to schedule a meeting with their parks team to make sure that we've got that appropriately covered. And we'll frankly, Michael, look at all opportunities, but I believe you're correct.
So Batting, the entrance off Batting A will need to be widened. And B, obviously, given the very close proximity of residences, there'll have to be restrictions on hours of traffic and perhaps other measures to make it safe. So can we get a report out on that at some point going forward?
Through the chair, by all means. Once we've, I would suggest, if you would be so willing, that once we meet with Langford and understand some of the particulars with them and the Batting Place access, that we'll be able to appropriately weigh the environmental implications to both, and then come back with some recommendations for council.
Perfect, perfect. And one comment on the issue of the material on the flat surfaces of the dam. My understanding from some of the engineering work done was that sand is frowned upon because it tends to hide cracking in the dam. Has that been addressed with the consultants?
Sorry, Michael, would you mind just rephrase? I'm sorry to say this. Would you mind just restating that just a little bit?
Yeah, so my memory of past discussions with engineers on this is that they don't like to have sand on the surfaces of the dam because, or softer material as you described it, because it tends to hide cracking in the dam if that occurs. Has that been the subject of discussions with the consultants?
Thank you for that. That is an excellent point, and I do understand exactly what you're talking about. What I can do is get that question directly out to the consultants, look for how we can improve the recreation ability up there, and provide that back at the same time that we talk about our access routes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Parkinson.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to argue a little bit with Councillor Jensen. I think we are building a swimming pool up there. We better make sure at the end we spend all this money that we have just a slapdash park up there for people to continue to enjoy. I mean, if we spend all this money and end up with a place that's recreationally unsatisfying to our citizens, we'll have gone backwards, not forwards. So yeah, let's do the technical engineering right. Let's get it built right, but let's make sure at the end of the day, let's remember it's for people. And if fish need a place to spawn, they don't have to do it at the main beach where the people want to go in the water. They can do it around the corner. It's a big enough lake. So let's focus on that. Let's make sure at the end of the day we have a park we're all bloody proud of.
All right. More comments. Councillor Kobayashi, then Day. Councillor Kobayashi, you're muted.
I was just going to move receipt of the report, actually. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I have a seconder, and then I'll go to discussion. By Councillor Logan. Day. Councillor Day, did you have a comment?
I do. Just excellent discussion. I know it's late, and I'm trying to be brief. really great points from everyone, but as we were discussing what's going to happen, I didn't want to push the envelope at all, but because obviously there's probably going to be work done on the access from Batting Place, I would just like to see if staff would be able to consider accessibility improvements, and that's a fairly simple thing. Crushed rock on the pathway would be awesome. It compacts much better, and it's way better for anything with wheels, like a wheelchair or a scooter or a stroller. So that's all.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing anybody else, so this is a motion to receive. Any and opposition? Seeing none, that motion passes. Moving on to bylaws, 8.1. This is bylaw number 1818, 5-year financial plan. This is for adoption. Seconder, I have, Councillor Logan has moved it. Seconder, looking, Councillor Jensen has seconded it. Any discussion? Sorry, I'm just going to clear everybody's hands. Seeing no discussion, I'll call the question.
I had a
Councillor Day.
Sorry, just wanted to clarify that I will be voting in opposition to the 5-year plan because we haven't considered any reduction in our capital projects despite the pandemic realities out there, and that's why.
Okay. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in opposition. Councillor Day opposes. Moving on, just as a quick reminder to everybody, the last council meeting, we did pass a bylaw which allows us to pass first, second, third readings all in at once. So I am looking for a mover and seconder regarding bylaw number 1819, the tax rate bylaw 2020. This is only for first, second, and third readings. Councillor has moved it. Councillor Kobayashi has seconded it. Discussion. Councillor, oh no, doesn't look like there's any discussion. Oh wait, there's two discussions. Councillor Parkinson, then Day. Councillor Parkinson.
So this was going to be either discussion on this item or the next one, but I notice in here that we talk about partial taxes for Colwood East and a partial tax for Colwood Central as being some of the revenue. And then later on, we're asked to pass a bylaw that Colwood Main, to put something into Colwood Main. And so there must be revenue coming from that, isn't there? I guess I was just confused why we only have 2 parcel areas paying sewer taxes and we're putting properties into different sewer areas. Can somebody explain that to me?
For the purposes of the tax rate notices going out now, Councillor, yes, it only includes the existing 3 parcel taxes, which is the CRD septic and the 2 sewer taxes. So you're correct. Those are the only 3 included in the current tax rate bylaw.
Go ahead, Councillor Parkinson.
Well, I guess the question is why, if we have other sewer areas, why aren't they in a tax bylaw? Are they grandfathered or something? I guess I just don't understand.
I'm looking at, sorry.
Sorry, Alan, I'm happy to let you discuss this first, but I also know that Councillor Baxter was involved in this when the LSAs were created and he's looking to speak to it. So I do not want to override you. So if you want to speak first, but otherwise I'll go to Councillor Baxter.
No, by all means, please go ahead. Thanks, Your Worship.
Okay, Councillor Baxter.
Hi. So as probably everybody knows by now, the creation of these sewer areas was needed the cooperation of the province. The province's understanding of how sewer specified areas work and the way they actually work in reality are not precisely the same. And the province insisted that even after the debt is paid off, you still have to keep adding people to an area like Maine because you can collect maintenance money through a sewer specified area, although nobody actually does it that way. So that was a habit started at the behest of the province. Our lawyers advised it at the time. And I think it's advisable unless we contact our lawyers and get a different opinion that we keep adding properties to Maine, even though it's paid off, we're not collecting any money. And that's the reason why there's no tax rate for that sewer area.
Before I Parkinson,
Sorry, I asked.
I'm just going to refer to staff. Staff, do you have anything in addition to that? I'm assuming
Nothing to
not.
add at this point.
Okay, thank you. Parkinson, are you are you satisfied or need a further question?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Well,
satisfied as you can be. Councillor Day.
Thank you. Just on the tax rate, I'll be voting in opposition. There are several programs available to commercial property owners through the federal and provincial governments. And there is no proof that I've been able to find that commercial owners will pass the savings from our tax rate onto their leasing businesses. And therefore, I will be in opposition to the tax rate bylaw.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in opposition. Councillor Day opposes. Looks like that's it. So moving on to adoption of 8.2. May I have a mover and seconder, please?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Jensen, seconded by, I'm sorry, was that Councillor Baxter?
Yes.
Moved by Councillor Baxter. So this is on adoption discussion. Councillor Day.
Sorry, no discussion.
Okay, thank you. I'll call the question then. Those in opposition? Councillor Day opposes. I'm assuming it didn't show up. Then we are now moving on to 8.3, which is bylaw number 1821. This is a main sewer LAS enlargement for 3330 Seawall Road, first, second, third reading and adoption this evening. May I have a mover and seconder for first and second? Moved by Councillor Kobayashi, seconded by Councillor Logan. Discussion? Seeing no discussion, I'll call the question. Anyone?
Mayor Martin?
Yes.
I just wanted to intervene. This is for first, second, and third. You just called for first and second.
Okay, my apologies. It's getting late. It's first, second, and Councillor Kobayashi, seconded by Councillor Logan. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in opposition? Seeing none, that passes. I need a mover and seconder for adoption, please. Moved by Councillor Jensen and seconded by anybody. Councillor Logan. Discussion? Seeing none. Any in opposition? That passes as well. Moving on to 8.4. This is bylaw number 1822, West Sewer LAS enlargement 3330 Seawall. First, second, and third reading. May I have a mover and seconder, please?
Moved.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Baxter, seconded by Councillor Kobayashi. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Any in opposition? No one's in opposition. Then I will move to adoption. I may have a mover and second. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Baxter, seconded by Councillor Kobayashi again. Thank you. Oh, Councillor Parkinson, do you have a discussion on, oh,
Yeah, I'm okay. I've got it now. Sorry, I was confused between 1821 and 1822, but I now have it. So
Okay.
sorry.
no, that's all right. So we are on adoption of 8.4. Any in opposition? Seeing none, that passes. Motion to adjourn. Councillor
So
Logan. So, everybody, any in opposition? No, none. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for staying so late. Thanks, staff.
Good night, all.
Night all.